Chapter 345. They were lucky enough to encounter a group of bandits, and they were lucky enough to obtain useful information from the bandit leader. Under the lead of the Burning Sky Ruler, they headed straight for Moontrace City. The distance to the Moontrace City was not far. A day later, everyone was able to faintly see the outline of a city appearing on an endless plain from afar. It was obvious that this was Moontrace City. Within a radius of 1,000 miles, Moontrace City was the only city. At the same time, it was also the only city on the illusionary moon plains. After finally finding the city, they quickly arrived at the city gate. However, they were stopped by the guards at the city gate. "Are you from outside?" Facing such a large group of unfamiliar guests, the guard was a little suspicious, so he asked. When he heard the guard, a Tao King realm expert stepped forward and smiled. "My lord, we're all from outside the city. Is it because of the illusionary moon gathering? All right, 10 low-grade spirit stones for each person to enter the city." Hearing the Tao King realm expert's words, the guard carefully sized them up, then said in a bad mood. "Illusionary moon gathering?" He didn't know what it was, but it should be some sort of gathering. Perhaps it was very famous. Perhaps it was because of the illusionary moon gathering that there were many cultivators entering Moontrace City, so the guard didn't think too much about it. He only thought that Xiao Chen and the others were also here to participate in the illusionary moon gathering. He didn't ask too much. If he asked about the illusionary moon gathering, he would be giving himself away. In any case, as long as they entered the city, it shouldn't be difficult to find out about the illusionary moon gathering. After paying nearly 1,000 low-grade spirit stones, Xiao Chen and the others were finally able to enter the city. It had to be said that the cost of living in Moontrace City was very high. Just the entrance fee alone required 10 low-grade spirit stones per person. Moreover, Moontrace City wasn't a big city in the Heavenly River continent. It wasn't even ranked. Even so, they still dared to charge such a high entrance fee. Who knew what the famous big cities in the Heavenly River continent would do? Nearly 1,000 low-grade spirit stones were used up just like that. However, Xiao Chen and the others did not care too much about it. Since they left the Heavenly Qin continent, they were naturally prepared, so they naturally had a lot of money on them. Strolling along the streets of Moontrace City, Yi Xuan noticed that this place was completely different from any other city in the Heavenly Qin continent, especially the architectural style. The houses in the Heavenly Qin continent were generally built with high-quality wood, such as fir, cypress, elm, etc. As for the houses in Moontrace City, they were basically all built with bluestones. Huge bluestones were polished into squares and piled up one by one to form houses. Since the materials used were different, the shape would naturally be different as well. However, compared to the wooden houses in the Heavenly Qin continent, the houses in the Moontrace City that were built with stones were obviously much harder. However, it could not be said that houses built with bluestones were better than those built with wood. The reason why there was such a big difference between the buildings of the two continents was also related to their different environments. First of all, the Heavenly Qin continent was not as chaotic as the Sky River continent. It could be said that the Heavenly Qin continent was basically in a relatively peaceful era. Other than the war with the demonic cultivators, there had not been any large-scale battles for thousands of years. Therefore, using wood to build houses was extremely suitable. Although the houses built with wood were obviously not as hard as those built with bluestones, the construction time was shorter and the cost was not huge. It was also easier to build, which was naturally more suitable for the relatively peaceful Heavenly Qin continent. In any case, the Heavenly Qin continent did not erupt with wars from time to time, so there was no need for bluestone houses that were too hard. However, the Sky River continent was different. It was not as peaceful as the Heavenly Qin continent. There were battles between various forces from time to time. Even the Saint clans, Saint sects, and Saint empires would often erupt in wars. As a result, there were naturally different requirements for the buildings, or at least they had to be harder. Therefore, even if the construction time was long and the cost was huge, the Sky River continent still insisted on using bluestones to build houses because it was hard. When war broke out, if talismans were added, it would be able to resist the impact of the battle. After strolling around the city, the scale of the Moon Trace City was not large, but it was not small either. It was equivalent to an ordinary city in the heavenly Chen continent's central divine realm. However, perhaps it was because of the illusionary moon convention, the Moon Trace City could be said to have a large population. Moreover, many of them were from other places. It was obvious that they had specially come to participate in the illusionary moon convention. With so many outsiders pouring into the Moon Trace City, it caused the inns and restaurants in the city to be almost full. After asking several inns, they were told that there were no empty rooms. Since they could not find an inn, they naturally had no place to stay. Just when everyone was at their wits' end, Xiaochen softly said to the Burning Heaven ruler, "Uncle Tian, I feel that we don't need to find an inn. After all, we don't know how long we will stay in the Moon Trace City. Moreover, in the future, the Moon Trace City might become a stronghold of our heavenly Chen continent. Therefore, we might as well directly buy a house. This way, not only will we have a place to stay, but other people from the heavenly Chen continent will also have a place to stay in the future." Everyone had been looking for an inn, but Xiaochen proposed to directly buy a house. Hearing this, the Burning Heaven ruler's eyes lit up. "That's right, why didn't I think of that?" Xiaochen's proposal made the Burning Heaven ruler overjoyed. That's right, everyone had just arrived in the Heavenly River continent. They didn't know how long they would stay in the Moon Trace City. Therefore, it was better to directly buy a house. Moreover, as Xiaochen said, even if everyone left in the future, this house could still be used as a stronghold for the people of the heavenly Chen continent. In the future, whoever came could stay in this house. It could be said that it was killing many birds with one stone. "Good boy, you have a way. We'll do as you say." Without concealing his admiration for Xiaochen, the Burning Heaven ruler laughed heartily. Then, he pressed his big hand on Xiaochen's head and ravaged it, expressing his affection for Xiaochen. After interacting with the Burning Heaven ruler for a few days, Xiaochen gradually understood the temperament of the Burning Heaven ruler. Among the rulers, the Burning Heaven ruler was perhaps the most forthright person. His temperament was very straightforward, and at the same time, he didn't have any schemes. Although he had lived for so many years, he didn't have any shrewdness. Whether he was happy or unhappy, it was directly expressed on his face. This point was very similar to Huangfu Ao. The two were indeed father and son. After ravaging Xiaochen for a while, the Burning Heaven ruler brought everyone to find a restaurant and had them wait there. As for himself, he brought Xiaochen to buy a house. 7th update, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 346. After settling everyone in the restaurant and waiting, Xiaochen and the Burning Sky ruler went to purchase a mansion. Along the way, Xiaochen learned that if one wanted to buy a mansion in Moon Trace City, they had to go to the City Lord's mansion. All vacant mansions belonged to the City Lord's mansion. After learning about the process of purchasing a mansion, Xiaochen and the Burning Sky ruler walked towards the City Lord's mansion. As the #1 faction in Moon Trace City, the City Lord's mansion was naturally not difficult to find. It was located in the center of Moon Trace City and occupied a large area. "Xiaochen, in the future, you and I will call each other uncle and nephew in the Tiana continent," the Burning Sky ruler said as they walked. In the Tiana continent, they naturally couldn't easily reveal their true identities. Who knew what kind of attitude the people of the Tiana continent had towards outsiders from other continents? If the Tiana continent was extremely xenophobic, wouldn't that be asking for trouble? Therefore, the Burning Sky ruler thought that the relationship between them was that of master and servant, and Xiaochen was his nephew. In the future, others would call the Burning Sky ruler Lord and Xiaochen young master. Hearing the Burning Sky ruler's words, Xiaochen nodded. In the Tiana continent, it was indeed necessary to pay attention to concealing their true identities. After all, they weren't from this continent. They rushed all the way to the City Lord's mansion. Just as Xiaochen and the Burning Sky ruler were walking along the street, in the distance, Xiaochen saw a group of guards wearing martial attire surrounding a white-haired old man, punching and kicking him. At the same time, in front of this group of guards, there was a luxuriously dressed young man watching all of this with a sneer. Obviously, the luxuriously dressed young man should be a descendant of some large family in Moontrace City, and the group of guards were his followers. As for the old man, judging from his clothes, he didn't seem to have any status, and his cultivation was only at the Earth Mirror realm. Facing such a scene, Xiaochen frowned slightly, but he didn't make a move. If they were in the Tianqian continent, Xiaochen would definitely berate them, but now, they were in the Tiana continent. First, he didn't know the identity of the young man, and second, Xiaochen didn't want to cause more trouble. Some of them were shocked that more than 10 strong young men were ganging up on an old man with one foot in the grave. Moreover, looking at the strength of these people, it was obvious that they did not hold back at all and were extremely ruthless. As for the old man who was being beaten up by the crowd, his complexion was already pale. His aura was weak and he was vomiting blood non-stop. It was evident that he was seriously injured. None of the passers-by dared to stop them. They were probably afraid of the young man's identity. Xiaochen silently walked past this group of people like other passers-by. Just as he passed by the young man, he heard the young man say with a sneer, "An old fart dares to meddle in other people's business. Isn't she just a slut? It's fine if I kill him, but you still dare to report me to the City Lord Manor. Humph, you don't know what you're talking about. Beat him up ruthlessly." As the young man's voice fell, the old man who was being beaten up weakly said, "Wuda, you're not human. My granddaughter is only 12 years old this year, and you're actually so ruthless. She's just a slut in your eyes, but in this old man's eyes, she's my only family. Us grandfather and granddaughter depend on each other for survival in Moontrace City. How can you do such a heartless thing? Today, this old man swears that as long as this old man still has a breath left in him, even if I have to report this to the imperial capital, this old man will seek justice. This old man doesn't believe that your Wu family can cover the sky with one hand. You still want to report this to the imperial capital? You old bastard, are you dreaming? Today, whether you can live or not will depend on this young master's mood. Beat him up ruthlessly, and kill this old man." As if he was completely enraged by the old man's words, Wuda's eyes were overflowing with killing intent as he shouted. Upon hearing Wuda's words, the dozen or so henchmen under him became even more ruthless in their attacks. Xiaochen passed by Wuda. From the brief conversation between the two of them, he could make out some clues. The matter should be that Wuda took a fancy to the old man's granddaughter, who was then forcefully taken advantage of, and finally tortured to death by Wuda. The old man was filled with grief and indignation, so he went to the City Lord Manor to report Wuda. In the end, Wuda found out about this matter, which was why he beat the old man up on the street. According to the old man, the granddaughter was only 12 years old. At such an age, she could only be considered a little girl. But even so, Wuda actually tortured her to death. Xiaochen originally intended to ignore this matter, but just as he was about to leave, he heard the old man's angry roar from behind. "Wuda, this old man will not let you go even if I become a ghost. You bastard!" As if he had used up his last breath, the old man's angry roar fell. It was as if he no longer had any strength left. He weakly lay on the ground, allowing the dozen or so henchmen to ruthlessly beat his body. His body trembled from time to time, and blood continuously flowed out from his mouth. The look in his eyes gradually became lax, but at the corner of the old man's eyes, 2 lines of clear tears silently flowed down. These 2 lines of clear tears seemed to be telling the injustice of the heavens, telling the grief and indignation in the old man's heart. The heavens were ruthless and treated all living things like straw dogs. Why were people divided into 3, 6, and 9 classes the moment they were born? Why did people without status and background have to be bullied and humiliated? Why was it said that the heavens had eyes, but no one had ever seen the heavens really open those eyes? His breathing grew weaker and weaker. Blood continuously flowed and gathered at the corner of the old man's mouth. At the same time, every time the old man breathed, because of the blood in his mouth, there would be a slight popping sound, as if a bubble was being blown. Xiaochen had already walked past the young man, but at this moment, he stopped in his tracks. Reason kept telling Xiao Chen that he shouldn't get involved in this matter. Now that they hadn't established a firm foothold in the Sky River continent and Moontrace City, they shouldn't cause trouble for no reason. But in the face of the old man's angry roar, Xiao Chen couldn't convince himself to ignore it. Looking at the silent Xiao Chen, the burning sky ruler didn't say a word, as if everything was up to Xiao Chen. If Xiao Chen wanted to get involved, he would stand firmly behind Xiao Chen and give him enough confidence. And if Xiao Chen chose to ignore it, he wouldn't say anything. At the same time, the young man behind him had already unsheathed the sword in his hand, walked up to the old man, and said with a sneer, "Old man, open your eyes a little wider in your next life. There are some people you can't afford to offend, and you still want to sue me? Go die, old thing." As he spoke, the young man thrust out his sword. Sword light flashed. Seeing that the old man was about to die under this sword, the surrounding people couldn't bear to watch and averted their gazes. However, at this critical moment, an unexpected scene occurred. A young man in white appeared out of nowhere and instantly appeared in front of the old man. He stretched out 2 fingers of his right hand, and with 2 fingers, he firmly clamped the young man's sword. 8th update, please bookmark, please recommend. Chapter 347. Just as he was about to kill the old man with a single strike, a white-clothed young man appeared in front of him at the last moment. Moreover, the white-clothed young man merely used 2 fingers to block his sword. Wu De looked at the young man in white in surprise. He had never seen this person before, but he seemed to be around the same age as him. He was handsome, with sharp eyebrows and bright eyes. At the same time, the aura that the young man in white exuded made Wu De's heart palpitate. Wu De had only felt this kind of aura from the princes in the imperial capital. This was the aura that could only be born when one was in a high position and was respected by tens of thousands of people. It was not something that a disciple of a big family like him could compare with. The young man in white was Xiao Chen. At the last moment, Xiao Chen could not hold back and chose to attack. There was no other way. He could not watch the old man die in front of him. Compared to Wu De's surprise, Xiao Chen was very calm. He flicked his finger and knocked away Wu De's sword. Then, he said indifferently, "He is already a dying man. Moreover, you killed his granddaughter. Let's end this matter here." Xiao Chen did not make things difficult for Wu De. He did not want to cause trouble. However, after hearing Xiao Chen's words, Wu De did not retreat. Instead, he frowned and asked, "Who are you?" He was a little intimidated by Xiao Chen's aura. Therefore, Wu De did not act rashly. He was afraid that Xiao Chen was a person with a big background. If it were not for this, Wu De would have already exploded. Hearing Wu De's words, Xiao Chen knew what he was thinking. His tone was still indifferent as he said, "Who I am is not important. Let's end this matter here. You have already beaten him to such a state. Why do you have to take his life?" Xiao Chen was unwilling to reveal his identity. Hearing this, Wu De stared at Xiao Chen. He frowned and kept thinking. It was true that Wu De was a hedonistic son of a rich family. However, he was not a fool. Xiao Chen's aura reminded him of the big shots he had seen in the imperial capital. Although no one dared to provoke the Wu family in Moontrace City, this was only limited to Moontrace City. Compared to the big shots in the imperial capital, his Wu family was just a small shrimp. Therefore, when facing Xiao Chen, Wu De was a little afraid. If Xiao Chen really had a powerful background, then Wu De could not afford to offend him. Since he could not figure out Xiao Chen's background, Wu De eventually chose to take a step back. He thought to himself that when he got back, he would investigate Xiao Chen's background thoroughly. If he really had a powerful background that the Wu family could not afford to offend, then he would drop the matter. However, if Xiao Chen was just a facade, then Wu De would definitely make him regret it. How dare he recklessly meddle in Wu De's business? Putting away his long sword, Wu De coldly snorted and said, "Let's go." After saying that, he turned around and left with a group of guards. Watching Wu De leave, Xiao Chen did not say anything. Although he had already guessed that Wu De would not let the matter rest, Once he found out that he had no background, he would definitely come looking for trouble. However, Xiaochen did not regret it. Since he had already done it, he naturally would not be afraid of Wu De. Moreover, Xiaochen did not want to cause trouble, but that did not mean that Xiaochen was afraid of trouble. Xiaochen did not care about a small family like the Wu family. With everyone's strength, they could easily destroy a small family like the Wu family. The only trouble was that after destroying the Wu family, it was very likely that other powerful forces would be involved. This was what Xiaochen was worried about. Turning around, Xiaochen arrived in front of the old man and squatted down. He discovered that the old man's injuries were indeed very serious. It was as if he only had a single breath left. If he left him alone, he would not be able to live for long. Xiaochen took out a healing pill from his storage ring. This healing pill was a heaven-grade pill with golden veins. It was refined by the pill cloud ruler for Xiaochen. In Moon Trace City, it could be considered a divine pill. Without the slightest reluctance, Xiaochen directly fed the pill to the old man. Immediately after, the Burning Sky Ruler used a sound transmission talisman to summon a cultivator from the heavenly Qin continent to take care of the old man. After that, the two of them returned to the City Lord's mansion. Wu De's matter was only a small interlude. On the way to the City Lord's mansion, the Burning Sky Ruler smiled and asked, "Do you regret saving that old man just now?" It could be seen that Xiaochen had gone through a very intense mental struggle before taking action. Facing the unfamiliar Heavenly River continent, he had to be much more cautious than when he was on the Heavenly Qin continent. Hearing the Burning Sky Ruler's question, Xiaochen truthfully replied, "Before I took action, I actually thought a lot about it, but after I took action, I didn't think so much. In any case, I couldn't just stand by and watch that old man be beaten to death. It's just that I feel a little sorry for causing trouble for everyone." Hearing Xiaochen's answer, the Burning Sky Ruler smiled and said, "After coming to the Heavenly River continent, we have indeed become a lot more cautious. Of course, this is also necessary, but there is a limit to everything. As the saying goes, going too far is as bad as not going far enough. If because of excessive caution, we go against our original intentions and become afraid, then the gains don't make up for the losses. Remember, we came to the Heavenly River continent to grow, to save the Heavenly Qin continent, not to take refuge. Caution is right, but we can't become cowards because of caution." Regarding Xiaochen's action, the Burning Sky Ruler not only didn't blame him, but was also very gratified. This was because Xiaochen didn't become a coward because of excessive caution. If Xiaochen hadn't taken action just now, then the Burning Sky Ruler would have been really disappointed. Because in that case, what was the purpose of everyone coming to the Heavenly River continent? Was it just to escape? Many thanks for Uncle Tian's teachings. Hearing the Burning Sky Ruler's words, Xiaochen smiled and nodded. That's right, the Burning Sky Ruler's words made him suddenly feel enlightened. Yes, what was the purpose of everyone coming to the Heavenly River continent? It was to grow, not to hide. Caution didn't mean fear. Since some things had already happened, even if they got into trouble, so what? As the saying goes, if it's a blessing, it's not a curse. If it's a curse, it can't be avoided. At worst, it's just a battle. Seeing Xiaochen understand, the Burning Sky Ruler smiled and nodded. Then, the two quickly arrived outside the City Lord's mansion and explained their purpose to the guards. Soon, the two arrived at the front yard of the City Lord's mansion, in a hall dedicated to the business of buying and selling mansions. At the same time that Xiaochen and the Burning Sky Ruler arrived at the City Lord's mansion, Wu De, who had returned to the Wu family, sat on the main seat of his residence. In front of Wu De, a middle-aged man with a Dao-querying realm cultivation base stood respectfully. This person was the head steward of the Wu family, Wu Fu. Looking at Wu Fu, Wu De coldly said, "Uncle Fu, you must investigate that brat for me. I want to see who exactly he is and how dare he meddle in my business." "Young master, don't worry. This old servant will do it right away." Hearing Wu De's words, Wu Fu nodded and immediately turned to leave. 9th update, please bookmark, please recommend. Chapter 348. Sure enough, Wuda had begun to investigate Xiaochen. However, Xiaochen had already guessed this. At this time, Xiaochen was in the City Lord Manor, buying a mansion with the Burning Skies ruler. The City Lord Manor had specially divided a hall for managing the buying and selling of mansions in the city. From ordinary civilian residences to huge luxurious courtyards, there was everything one could think of. When Xiaochen and the Burning Skies ruler entered the hall, a fat man with celestial cultivation took the initiative to greet them. With a face full of smiles, he said to the Burning Skies ruler, "Are you two planning to buy a mansion or sell it?" "We're planning to buy a mansion in Moontrace City," the Burning Skies ruler indifferently replied upon hearing Fatty's words. "Then, what kind of mansion are you two planning to buy?" "The key is to be big. Price is not a problem. Price is not a problem." Hearing the Burning Skies ruler's words, the fat man's attitude immediately became more enthusiastic. Not only did he invite Xiaochen and the Burning Skies ruler to a private room, he even had a maid prepare tea for them. Sitting across from Xiaochen and the Burning Skies ruler, Fatty took out more than a dozen plans of various mansions from his storage ring. These mansions were currently vacant in Moontrace City, and all of them were luxurious mansions. "Please take a look. There are currently 18 vacant mansions in Moontrace City. These are the plans of these mansions." Spreading out the 18 plans on the table, Fatty enthusiastically introduced them. In fact, the Burning Skies ruler didn't have many requirements for mansions. There was only one, and that was to be big enough to accommodate many people. After all, this place might become a stronghold of the heavenly Qin continent in the future. If it was too small, it would definitely not be big enough to accommodate many people in the future. There were a total of 18 apartments of various sizes. The smaller ones only had one courtyard, while the larger ones had a total of 18 courtyards. Among them, there was a front courtyard, a back courtyard, a main courtyard, and 15 side courtyards. They occupied a huge area, enough for thousands of people to live in. Skimming over the 18 plans, the Burning Skies ruler looked at Xiaochen and asked, "Chinner, which one do you like?" "Uncle Sky, how about this one? It's big enough." Hearing Burning Sky ruler's words, Xiaochen immediately pointed at the floor plan of the largest mansion. Seeing that Xiaochen had actually chosen the largest mansion, the fatty was even more overjoyed. This mansion was originally the property of a wealthy family. However, because they had offended some people, they had no choice but to leave Moontrace City with their entire family. Thus, this mansion had been left empty. It had been vacant for 5 to 6 years. Due to the high price, it had never been sold. Now that Xiaochen had chosen this set, before the Burning Heaven ruler could speak, Fatty enthusiastically said, "Young master really has a good eye. This mansion can be considered one of the best in the entire Moontrace City. If not for the fact that the previous owner had offended the Wu family and was forced to leave, this mansion would definitely not be put up for sale. Someone who offended the Wu clan and was chased out of Moontrace City." Hearing this, Xiaochen sneered inwardly. It seemed that this Wu clan was indeed nothing good. However, this wasn't important. After some discussion, the Burning Skies ruler finally bought this mansion for 100,000 mid-grade spirit stones. Spirit stones were divided into top, upper, middle, and lower grades. The price difference between each grade was 100-fold. In other words, 100 low-grade spirit stones could only be exchanged for one mid-grade spirit stone. Moreover, it was a price with no market. As for 100,000 mid-grade spirit stones, that was 10 million low-grade spirit stones. This price was indeed a sky-high price for ordinary cultivators. However, to the Burning Skies ruler, it really wasn't a big deal. After paying 100,000 medium-grade spirit stones on the spot and obtaining the title deed for the mansion, the Burning Heaven ruler said, "My uncle and nephew came from a nearby city. We don't have a place to stay yet. If it's possible, I'd like to ask you to take us there now." Fatty naturally wouldn't refuse the Burning Skies ruler's request. He enthusiastically personally led the Burning Skies ruler and Xiaochen to the mansion. The mansion was located in the east of Moontrace City, in the inner city area. It was very prosperous. Fatty chatted with the two as they hurried to the mansion. The two of you shouldn't have hired maids and servants yet, right? I do have some connections, and I can sell them to you at a cheaper price. Don't worry, they will definitely be clever and skillful. Even their appearances will be guaranteed to satisfy the two of you. After selling the mansion, Fatty still wanted to promote the maids and servants. After all, it was impossible to live in such a large mansion without maids and servants. However, upon hearing Fatty's words, the Burning Skies ruler flatly refused without a second thought. No need, we will find maids and servants ourselves. No trouble. Fatty wasn't dissatisfied with the Burning Skies ruler's decisive refusal. After all, the mansion had already been sold and the commission he received was enough for Fatty to live happily for several years. A few maids and servants were obviously not too important. Naturally, it was impossible for Fatty to find maids and servants. In the future, this place would be the stronghold of the heavenly stellar continent. If there were outsiders, wouldn't this secret be exposed very quickly? Therefore, in the eyes of Xiao Chen and the Burning Skies ruler, maids and servants were not needed. Even if they were needed, they would have to go through a strict assessment and be 100% trustworthy before they could recruit them. It didn't take long for the trio to arrive at the mansion from the city lord's mansion. Perhaps because no one had lived here for a long time, the mansion was very dirty and messy. Some of the furniture that hadn't been moved away in time was already tilted and covered in a thick layer of dust. Many thanks, please accept this small token of our appreciation. We will do the rest ourselves. After walking around the mansion, the Burning Skies ruler took out 100 low-grade spirit stones and handed them to Fatty. His meaning was very clear, there was nothing else for him to do. Hearing the Burning Skies ruler's words, Fatty was polite and quickly left. The people in this line of work were obviously experts at reading people's expressions. Naturally, they wouldn't stay here and refuse to leave. After sending off Fatty, the Burning Skies ruler and Xiao Chen stood in the front yard and looked at the dusty courtyard. The Burning Skies ruler softly asked, "How is it? What do you think?" "Very good. Although it's a bit messy, it'll be fine after a bit of cleaning," replied Xiao Chen. In the future, this will be our first home in the Heavenly River continent. Since that's the case, Chener, you can choose a name for it. Tomorrow, I'll have someone make a plaque and hang it outside the door. A name? Uncle Tian, how about Heavenly Stellar Residence? Heavenly Stellar Residence? Good, not bad, Heavenly Stellar Residence. This name is not bad. In the future, as long as people from the Heavenly Stellar Continent come here, they will be able to see the mystery behind it at a glance. Good, let's call it Heavenly Stellar Residence. Xiao Chen named their first home in the Heavenly Stellar Continent as Heavenly Stellar Residence. Hearing this name, the Burning Skies ruler obviously liked it very much. He immediately decided that tomorrow, he would have someone make a plaque. 10th update, please bookmark, please recommend. Chapter 349. With a place to stay, the crowd that had been waiting in the restaurant quickly rushed to the Heavenly Stellar Residence. Along with them was the elder that Xiao Chen had saved. Although Xiao Chen had already fed him a heaven-grade healing elixir, he was still unconscious and seriously injured. Therefore, Xiao Chen naturally could not leave him alone. He could only let him stay in Wu Chen's residence for the time being and let him leave after he recovered. Without maids and servants, everyone could only clean up by themselves. Even Xiao Chen and the Burning Sky ruler personally wiped the dust in the room. Dozens of people worked together. However, it was a little too big. Therefore, they used an entire day to clean up the entire courtyard. This was because they were all cultivators. If they were ordinary people, they would not be able to finish cleaning in 3 days. After a thorough cleaning, the Heavenly Stellar Residence looked brand new. It already had a faint feeling of a rich family. However, although the cleanliness was done, there was still a lot of furniture that needed to be added. After all, no one lived here for a long time. The previous furniture was already useless. 2 Dalquarian realm cultivators were sent to buy furniture and build a plaque to hang outside the door. Because they didn't lack money, and they also had the Burning Sky Ruler's large treasury, everything went very smoothly. The next day, all the furniture was sent over, and a plaque with the words Heavenly Stellar Residence was hung outside the door. After everything was done, everyone was divided into rooms. The Burning Sky Ruler sat on the main seat. Naturally, no one had any objections. However, Xiaochen was also living with the Burning Sky Ruler. In the huge main courtyard, only Xiaochen and the Burning Sky Ruler lived in it. Finally, there was a place to stay. This was indeed a great psychological relief for everyone. At least they were no longer homeless and had nowhere to stay. 3 days passed. On this day, the Burning Sky Ruler gathered everyone in the main hall. There were a total of 78 people. The Burning Sky Ruler sat on the main seat. Xiaochen sat below him. As for the others, they sat on the left and right according to their cultivation. The Burning Sky Ruler looked at everyone below and said indifferently, "Although we now have a place to stay, we still can't be careless. Our identities must not be known to outsiders. Do you understand? Sir, please rest assured. All of us have engraved this point in our hearts. We will be extremely careful when we go out." Hearing the Burning Sky Ruler's words, the 10,000 Weapon Pavilion's deputy pavilion head respectfully replied. Among the crowd, besides Sky Burning Ruler, the 2 super experts in the Tao Master realm had the highest cultivation. Among them, the deputy leader of the 10,000 Weapon Pavilion was called Zhang Qi, while the deputy leader of the Heaven Dan Valley was called Xikong Ming. Hearing Zhang Qi's words, the Burning Sky Ruler faintly nodded. Then, he continued, "In the past few days, did you find any useful information? Especially regarding the Illusionary Moon Conference?" They had already stayed in the Heavenly Stellar Residence for 3 days. During these 3 days, they naturally didn't stay idle. They either went out alone, in pairs, or in groups of 3 or 5. On the one hand, they were familiar with the environment of Moon Trace City. On the other hand, they wanted to learn more about the Heavenly River continent, or rather, the situation of the Danyang region. After 3 days of familiarization, everyone had a certain understanding of the Danyang region that they were currently in. There were 3 kingdoms and 2 sects in the entire Danyang region. The 3 kingdoms were the 3 great empires, and the 2 sects were the 2 great sections. These 5 great forces divided the entire Danyang region, and Moon Trace City, where everyone was now, was within the Moonless Empire, one of the 3 great empires. According to the current situation, there were no saints in the 5 great forces of the Danyang region. However, although there were no saints, there were Tao Emperors. For example, in the Moonless Empire, it was said that there were Tao Emperors in the imperial family. Moreover, the number was unknown. After all, Moon Trace City was only a small city in the Moonless Empire. It was naturally impossible to know much about the imperial family. After hearing about the overall situation of Danyang County, Sky Burning Ruler couldn't help but sigh softly. The strength of the Heavenly River continent is indeed far greater than that of the Heavenly Stellar continent. A mere county actually has 5 great forces, and all of them have Tao Emperors. They didn't mean to look down on Danyang County. After all, it was only a county in the Heavenly River continent. However, just this county alone wasn't smaller than the Heavenly Stellar continent. At the same time, according to everyone's guess, the number of Tao Emperors in this county wouldn't be less than the current Heavenly Stellar continent. In other words, the strength of a county in the Heavenly River continent was equivalent to the strength of the entire Heavenly Stellar continent. Even if it was inferior, it wouldn't be too far off. There were 100 such counties in the Heavenly River continent. They knew the most about the situation in Danyang County. Above Danyang County was the Tianfeng Prefecture. As one of the 18 prefectures in the Heavenly River continent, the Tianfeng Prefecture governed 6 counties. The one who dominated the Tianfeng Prefecture was the sage sect that everyone paid the most attention to. It was called Tianfeng Xingzong. It was very difficult to inquire about the name of Tianfeng Xingzong in Moon Trace City. Everyone only got the name Tianfeng Xingzong. As for the strength of Tianfeng Xingzong, no one knew. However, since it could be called a sage sect and ruled an entire prefecture, its strength naturally couldn't be underestimated. Moreover, Tianfeng's Zone definitely had a saint overseeing it. For the time being, they didn't plan to come into contact with Tianfeng's Zone. According to the decision made by Burning Sky Ruler and Xiaochen, it was best for everyone to first gain a firm foothold in the Danyang County. After all, even in the Danyang County, based on the current situation, Burning Sky Ruler was no longer an invincible existence. The 3 countries and 2 sects in the Danyang County all had Dao emperors overseeing them. As such, training in the Danyang County was clearly the best choice. After talking about the Danyang County, Burning Sky Ruler asked about the situation of the Illusionary Moon Conference. The Illusionary Moon Conference was held in Moon Trace City. Hearing Burning Sky Ruler's words, Zhang Qi said, "My lord, according to our investigation, the Illusionary Moon Conference was held by the Moonless Empire's imperial family. The purpose seems to be to divide a treasure called the Illusionary Moon Fruit. It's said that the Illusionary Moon Fruit is the supreme treasure of the entire Illusionary Moon Plane, and even the Moonless Empire. As a result, it's on the Illusionary Moon Ancient Tree. In the entire Danyang County, only the Illusionary Moon Plane has this Illusionary Moon Ancient Tree. The Illusionary Moon Plane is also the reason why the Illusionary Moon Plane got its name." Zhang Qi truthfully reported the information to Burning Sky Ruler. However, when she said that, Zhang Qi paused for a moment, then continued with a bit of embarrassment. "However, we still don't know what effect this Illusionary Moon Fruit has. However, it shouldn't be an ordinary item since the Moonless Empire's imperial family values it so much. They only heard about the Illusionary Moon Conference, but didn't know what the Illusionary Moon Fruit was." Hearing Zhang Qi's words, Burning Sky Ruler said indifferently, "Do your best to investigate this Illusionary Moon Fruit. I want to know what kind of treasure it is and what effect it has." 11th update. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 350. He originally thought that the Illusionary Moon Conference was just a simple gathering, but now it seemed like that wasn't the case. Not only was the Illusionary Moon Conference organized by the Moonless Empire's royal family, but it also seemed like the royal family attached great importance to it. The Burning Sky Ruler was interested in the Illusionary Moon Conference and the Illusionary Moon Fruit, especially the Illusionary Moon Fruit. What kind of treasure was it that the Moonless Empire's royal family attached so much importance to it? Zhang Qi respectfully replied upon hearing the Burning Heaven Ruler's words. In the next few days, Zhang Qi was fully responsible for investigating the Illusionary Moon Conference. As for Xiaochen, he didn't go out. For the next few days, Xiaochen had been learning about Dao from the Burning Sky Ruler. He was already at the peak of the Sky Realm and was only a step away from breaking through to the Dao Querying Realm. However, it wasn't that simple to break through to the Dao Querying Realm. First, Xiaochen needed to understand what Dao was. Therefore, for the next few days, Xiaochen had been tirelessly seeking guidance from the Burning Sky Ruler about Dao. Facing Xiaochen's questions, the Burning Sky Ruler didn't feel annoyed at all. He explained in detail to Xiaochen. He had already started preparing to break through to the Dao Querying Realm. As usual, in the main courtyard, the Burning Sky Ruler was explaining martial Dao knowledge to Xiaochen. Martial Dao is actually a kind of cultivation. A more common explanation for Dao is that it refers to all things in the world, the Burning Sky Ruler explained slowly. At this moment, Zhang Qi walked in and strode to the Burning Sky Ruler. She bowed respectfully and said, "My lord, the matter of the Illusionary Moon Fruit has been investigated." Hearing Zhang Qi's words, the Burning Sky Ruler was surprised. Then, he looked at Zhang Qi and said, "Oh, then tell me what kind of treasure it is." "My lord, this Illusionary Moon Fruit actually only has one effect. However, this is the first time I've heard of such an effect. It can expand the Dantian." When Zhang Qi first learned about the effect of the Illusionary Moon Fruit, she was bewildered. There was a treasure in this world that could expand the Dantian? It was simply too magical. He had never heard of such a thing in the heavenly Qin continent. Hearing Zhang Qi's words, the burning heaven ruler's eyes lit up. Don't think that expanding the Dantian was useless. On the contrary, the illusory moon fruit's ability to expand the Dantian was absolutely sufficient to attract any cultivator. Even a Dao Emperor realm expert like the burning heaven ruler might not be able to resist such temptation. Expanding one's Dantian, to put it bluntly, was to increase the amount of spiritual power stored in one's Dantian. Think about it, if two martial artists of the same cultivation level could have a larger amount of spiritual power stored in their Dantian, what would the result be? He was going to exhaust his opponent to death. He never thought that there would be such a treasure in this world. It could be said that the illusionary moon fruit was an irresistible temptation to any cultivator below the Saint realm. Without much hesitation, the burning heaven ruler said in a deep voice, "It would be great if we could get the mirage moon fruit," but, as he spoke, the burning sky ruler looked at Zhang Qi. His meaning was clear. Since Zhang Qi was able to find out the effects of the illusionary moon fruit, then she definitely knew how to participate in the illusionary moon conference. Facing the burning heaven ruler's gaze, Zhang Qi was clearly prepared and immediately spoke. "My lord, you already know that the illusionary moon conference is held by the Moonless Empire's imperial family. Its purpose is to divide the illusionary moon fruit. According to the information I've gathered, the illusionary moon ancient tree bears fruit once every 100 years, and each time it bears no more than 500 fruits. Among them, 40% is handed over to the Tian Fengxing Zone, 20% is taken by the imperial family, 10% is taken by the 4 marquises, and another 10% is taken by the 8 marquises, so 80% is taken. The remaining 20% is taken by the imperial family so that the large families of the Moonless Empire have no complaints. According to the rules of the Illusionary Moon Conference, the large families of the Moonless Empire can only send cultivators below the Heaven Realm to participate in the tournament. The maximum number of people cannot exceed 3. Every time they win a match, they can obtain 1 illusionary moon fruit. In other words, as long as they have the strength, they can continue to fight until the last 20% is divided. Then, the Illusionary Moon Conference will end. As for how to participate in the Illusionary Moon Conference, you need an invitation letter. However, it's not difficult to obtain an invitation letter. I've already found out that the City Lord Mansion of the Illusionary Moon City has an invitation letter. However, you need to spend 10,000 mid-grade spirit stones to purchase it. Moreover, the buyer's cultivation is limited. The Moonless Empire's imperial family didn't set the threshold too high. After all, the purpose of holding the Illusionary Moon Conference was to prevent the large families of the Moonless Empire from complaining. That way, as long as you were a large family of the Moonless Empire and proved you had the strength, you could participate in the Illusionary Moon Conference. Because of that, the invitations to the Illusionary Moon Conference were either given away or purchased. 10,000 mid-grade spirit stones were used to prove your faction's wealth. After all, a faction that could use 10,000 mid-grade spirit stones to buy an invitation letter obviously couldn't be too poor. Otherwise, who would use 10,000 mid-grade spirit stones to do something they weren't confident in? Having an invitation letter didn't mean you would definitely obtain the illusionary moon fruit. Therefore, 10,000 mid-grade spirit stones were used to prove your wealth. At the very least, you needed to be a Dao King to purchase it. This was to prove your strength. If a faction didn't even have a Dao King, then they naturally wouldn't know that the imperial family valued them. As such, there was no need for them to participate in the Illusionary Moon Conference. To put it bluntly, the 20% of the illusionary moon fruits in the Illusionary Moon Conference was actually used by the imperial family to buy people's hearts. Therefore, the imperial family didn't care who obtained the illusionary moon fruits in the end. After all, what belonged to them was already in their pockets. After hearing Zhang Qi's words, the Burning Sky ruler immediately laughed loudly. His laughter was comfortable, as if he had already obtained the 20% of the illusionary moon fruits. As he laughed, the Burning Sky ruler looked at Xiao Chen and softly muttered to himself, "You can only send cultivators below the Heaven Realm to participate. Moreover, you can't send more than 3 people. You can obtain one illusionary moon fruit every time you win. As long as you have the strength, you can continue to fight until you obtain the 20% of the illusionary moon fruits. Is that right? That's right. Zhang Qi also understood the Burning Sky Ruler's words and similarly replied with a smile, that's right. Seeing the two of them singing the same tune, Xiaochen could only helplessly smile bitterly. He had already guessed the Burning Sky Ruler's decision. As expected, just as Zhang Qi finished speaking, the Burning Sky Ruler made his decision. Alright, let a Dao King Realm cultivator go and purchase the invitation letter. We will only send one person. I don't believe anyone below the Dao Querying Realm can win against our King Bewitching Sword. Ha, I will definitely obtain the 20% of the illusionary moon fruits. 12th update. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 351. To put it bluntly, the Illusionary Moon Convention was a way for the royal family to win people over. After all, they had already obtained the benefits that the royal family deserved. As for the remaining 20%, if the royal family still wanted to take it for themselves, it would obviously cause dissatisfaction among the other forces. Thus, it was better to just take it out and let the other forces compete for it. This way, not only could it dispel the dissatisfaction in the hearts of the other forces, it could also win them over and make them more loyal to the royal family. Of course, regarding the illusionary moon fruit, the biggest winner was obviously the Tianfeng Zone. They didn't need to do anything and could directly take away 40%. However, there was no other way. Tianfeng Zone was a sage sect and had a saint overseeing it. He had already sent people to the city lord's mansion to purchase the Illusionary Moon Convention's invitation. To the Burning Sky Ruler, the illusionary moon fruit was definitely a treasure. At least, no one in the heavenly Qin continent had ever heard of it. Moreover, it could increase the spiritual power capacity of a cultivator's dantian. This was truly heaven-defying. Although it couldn't directly allow everyone to break through, it could increase everyone's battle strength. He was full of confidence and could only send out Sky Realm cultivators. As such, who in the Moonless Empire could be Xiao Chen's opponent? He only planned to send out Xiao Chen. Just as the Burning Sky Ruler sent people to purchase the invitation, on the other side, in the Wu family's mansion, Wuda's residence, Wu Fu, who had been busy investigating Xiao Chen's identity, was currently respectfully reporting the situation to Wuda. Originally, there should have been a result long ago, but Wu Fu had always been cautious, so he repeatedly investigated Xiao Chen's identity. After confirming that there was no mistake, he came to report to Wuda. According to Wu Fu's investigation, Xiao Chen and the others seemed to have appeared out of thin air. He couldn't find out their identities at all. He only knew that before entering the Moon Trace City, they had killed a group of bandits on the illusionary moon plane. As for what happened before that, Wu Fu knew nothing. This was natural. Xiao Chen and the others weren't people of the Heavenly River continent. It would be strange if Wu Fu could find out. It was indeed too strange. It was as if a group of people had appeared out of thin air. Hearing Wu Fu's words, Wuda's complexion sank as he said, "How is this possible? How can dozens of people not be able to find any clues? Could it be that they all popped out from the cracks in the rocks? Young master, this old servant also feels that this matter is strange. However, this old servant has already used all of the Wu family's channels to investigate. In the end, we still came up empty-handed." Hearing Wuda's words, Wu Fu said in a rather helpless manner. He had already exhausted all his resources to investigate, but he still couldn't find any clues. Hearing this, Wuda didn't say anything else. He already knew that Xiao Chen and the others had bought a mansion in Moon Trace City and were now living in Moon Trace City. After exhorting for a long time, Wuda said in a low voice, "Uncle Fu, in your opinion, why can't we find out their identities?" "Young master, for such a situation to occur, there are actually only two possibilities. The first is that this group of people really don't have any status and are merely villagers from an unknown small mountain village." Hearing Wuda's words, Wu Fu opened his mouth to reply. "What about the second one?" Wuda asked. The second one is that their status has already exceeded the level that the Wu family can come into contact with. That's why we can't find out. And this level of status has probably already surpassed the Moonless Empire and reached straight to Glory Sect. Wu Fu said. When he mentioned the two words Glory Sect, Wu Fu's face turned slightly serious. Any faction that dared to have the word glory in their name was definitely in existence that couldn't be trifled with. They were definitely the overlords of a region. Wu De spoke the thoughts in his heart. Hearing Wu Fu's words, Wu De's expression turned even more complicated. He had been holding a grudge in his heart all this while. According to Wu De's character, how could he possibly tolerate this? In Moon Trace City, it had always been him, Wu De Huai, who was the one who helped others. Since when had anyone dared to spoil his plans? However, even though he was holding a grudge in his heart, Wu De indeed didn't dare to take the risk. The development of the situation was a little strange and completely unexpected. Just as Wu Fu had said, there were generally only two possibilities for such a situation. If it was the first possibility, Wu Fu definitely wouldn't have the slightest scruples and could directly kill Xiao Chen. But if it was the second possibility, Wu Fu didn't dare to imagine what the consequences would be if he acted rashly. If Xiao Chen and the others were really related to Glory Sect, then it wouldn't be strange if the Wu family couldn't find out. But if the Wu family dared to make a move on someone from Glory Sect, then the consequences, he was in a dilemma. But at this moment, Wu Fu spoke up. Actually, young master, you don't have to do this. I've received news that they have already gone to the City Lord's residence to purchase an invitation letter for the Fantasy Moon competition. This time, the Fantasy Moon competition is hosted by His Royal Highness, the Third Prince. With Mrs. position in the Third Prince's heart, wouldn't it be an easy task to deal with this kid in the Fantasy Moon competition? Moreover, even if these people really have a great background, it has nothing to do with our Wu family. The royal family will naturally take care of it. Wu Fu had already received news that Xiao Chen and the others were preparing to participate in the Fantasy Moon competition and had already purchased an invitation letter from the City Lord's residence. Therefore, he proposed to make a move on the Fantasy Moon competition, and it was the Third Prince who would do it. In fact, the reason why the Wu clan was able to develop into a large clan second only to the City Lord's mansion in Moon Trace City was entirely due to Wu De's elder sister. This girl was born with natural beauty, and was accepted into the imperial capital's Royal Academy at the mere age of 12. Thereafter, she got to know the current emperor's third prince in the Royal Academy, and eventually became the third prince's woman. Relying on the third prince's power and influence, Wu De's elder sister's status naturally rose along with the tide. With one person ascending to the Tao, even her fowls and dogs ascending to the heavens, the Wu family naturally grew rapidly. The person in charge of hosting the Fantasy Moon competition this time was the third prince. Hearing Wu Fu's words, Wu De immediately rejoiced in his heart. He excitedly stood up and sneered, good idea. Uncle Fu, people always say that the older the ginger, the spicier it is. Indeed, it is so. I'll go look for my sister right now. Originally, he was still guessing the identity of Xiao Chen and the others. However, there was no need for that now. Uncle Fu's idea could be said to be extremely perfect. After speaking, without waiting for Wu Fu to reply, Wu De immediately rushed out of the room with large strides and headed straight for his sister's residence. On the way, Wu De constantly sneered in his heart. Ha, truly reckless. After offending me, you actually want to participate in the Fantasy Moon competition. Good, very good. This time, I will definitely make you die in the Fantasy Moon competition. After all, the Fantasy Moon competition doesn't say that killing is prohibited. He thought that he was infallible and thought that he could kill Xiao Chen. Little did he know that Wu De's action was personally pushing the Wu family into an abyss of eternal damnation. 13th update. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 352. Listening to Wu Fu's suggestion, Wu De rushed to his sister's residence. The host of the Illusionary Moon Conference this time was the Moonless Empire's third prince. As the third prince's lover, Wu Da's sister had already returned to the Wu family. He arrived at a garden in the Wu family. This was the residence of Wu Da's sister. Running into the courtyard, he saw a young girl wearing a long skirt sitting in the garden. Taking large strides forward, Wu Da smiled and called out, "Sister. What's the matter? Why are you in such a hurry? You don't even know the rules." Wu Da's sister was called Wu Yun. Seeing Wu Da rush in, Wu Yun unhappily said. Being scolded by Wu Yun, Wu Da awkwardly scratched the back of his head. Seeing that, Wu Yun helplessly bitterly smiled. As siblings, Wu Yun naturally doted on her brother. When Wu Da was only 2 years old, their mother had already passed away. As the head of the Wu family, their father had many matters to attend to. Naturally, he didn't have much time to take care of the siblings. So, since young, Wu Da could be said to have been brought up by Wu Yun. To Wu Da, Wu Yun was both his sister and his mother. Look at how old you are already. Why are you still so careless? Sit down. Wu Da sat down after scolding Wu Da. Hearing that, Wu Da obediently sat beside Wu Yun and said to Wu Yun with a fawning smile. Sister, I was bullied. This time, you have to help me. He told Wu Yun about Xiaochen. Of course, the entire process was made up by Wu Da. He said that Xiaochen forcefully took advantage of a girl. Wu Da couldn't stand it and went up to stop him. However, Wu knew that he wasn't a match for Xiaochen. In the end, he was beaten up by Xiaochen. Hearing Wu Da's words, Wu Yun lightly drank a mouthful of tea. Wu Yun loved to drink flower tea. Moreover, these flower teas were all planted by her. The taste was pretty good. Putting down the teacup, Wu Yun indifferently said, You want me to kill him during the illusionary moon conference? Without needing Wu Da to say it, Wu Yun had already guessed that Wu Da wanted to kill someone. Hearing that, Wu Yun repeatedly nodded. Seeing that, Wu Yun said, I can promise you that, but you have to promise me something. Elder sister, what are you talking about? Let alone one condition, even if there were 100, as your younger brother, I would definitely agree. Wu Da laughed. Oh? Then if I ask you to pluck the moon from the sky and give it to me, will you also agree? Hearing that, Wu Yun said in a displeased manner. Isn't that simple? Elder sister, just wait for me. Tonight, I will pluck the moon from the sky for you. Knowing that Wu Yun was joking with him, Wu Da also boasted. Helplessly, he rolled his eyes at Wu Da. This fellow really knew how to brag without even thinking about a draft. All right, you don't have to go and pick the moon. You just have to promise me that this time, you have to follow me to the imperial capital and enter the imperial school to cultivate. Look at you, you're almost 30 years old, but you're only at the Earth Clear Mirror realm. In the future, when father gets old, how can I be at ease handing the Wu clan head position over to you? Wu Yun's condition was very simple. However, hearing these words, Wu Da was put in a difficult position. He originally didn't like to cultivate, and even more so, he couldn't endure hardships. If he were to go to the imperial school, wouldn't he be exhausted to death? Although he was depressed in his heart, looking at Wu Yun's appearance, if he didn't agree, Wu Yun obviously wouldn't help him. Thinking about how he had to kill Xiaochen, Wu Da finally clenched his teeth and nodded heavily. All right, I promise, elder sister. Seeing Wu Da nod his head, Wu Yun opened her mouth and said, This is what you said. This time, even if I have to tie you up, I will bring you to the imperial capital. After successfully persuading Wu Yun to agree to his request, Wu Da left in satisfaction after half an hour. With elder sister's help, brat, this young master will definitely kill you in one go. While walking, Wu Da secretly thought to himself. Xiaochen still didn't know about Wu Da's actions. To him, Wu Da was a completely insignificant person. So after the previous incident, Xiaochen didn't take Wu Da seriously at all. If Wu Da didn't come looking for trouble with him, then this matter would be over. However, if Wu Da acted recklessly, then Xiaochen didn't recommend directly exterminating the Wu family. In any case, Xiaochen had dozens of experts from the heavenly Qin continent gathered around him. Not to mention, there was also a Dao Emperor realm expert. Wouldn't it be easy for them to exterminate a small Wu family? He only hoped that Wuda would know when to advance and when to retreat. After all, there wasn't any deep hatred between them. But now, it seemed that Wuda was clearly courting death. In the Heavenly Chen residence, the Burning Heaven ruler was still explaining the knowledge of the Tao to Xiao Chen. However, the time was shortened. Most of the time, Xiao Chen was still preparing for the Illusionary Moon Conference. Although Xiao Chen wasn't afraid of any cultivator of the same realm, this was his first time fighting with a cultivator from the Heavenly River continent. He still couldn't let his guard down. While preparing for the Illusionary Moon Conference, when he went to the City Lord's mansion to buy the invitation, he was informed that the Illusionary Moon Conference would be held in half a month. As such, the Burning Heaven ruler and the others bided their time. Days passed. As the date of the Illusionary Moon Conference approached, Moon Trace City became more and more lively. All the major forces of the Moonless Empire gathered in Moon Trace City. For a time, Moon Trace City could be said to be filled with experts. Dao Seeking Realm and Dao Confirmation Realm cultivators could be seen everywhere. There were also many Dao Transformation Realm cultivators. Even Dao King Realm experts would appear from time to time. Almost all the powerful forces of the Moonless Empire gathered in Moon Trace City. The Burning Heaven ruler and the others naturally received news of the gathering of these local forces. Moreover, after this period of familiarity, everyone had a more intuitive understanding of the division of forces in the Moonless Empire. In the simplest terms, the forces of the Moonless Empire were divided into 4 levels. The first level, needless to say, was naturally the Imperial family. There were Dao Emperors in charge. Below the Imperial family was the second level, which was the 4 great princes of the Moonless Empire and the 8 great marquises. They all had Dao Sovereign Realm experts in charge. However, although they were at the same level, the 4 great princes were much stronger than the 8 great marquises. The above 2 levels were considered to be the upper-level forces of the Moonless Empire. The third level below was the various forces that participated in the Illusionary Moon Conference. They all had Dao King Realm experts in their clans, and almost all of them had official titles in the Moonless Empire. The various forces at this level were considered the middle forces of the Moonless Empire. As for the 4th level, it was a clan like the Wu clan of Moon Trace City. They dominated the city, but there were no Dao King Realm experts in their clan. In the entire Moonless Empire, they couldn't be seen in public. However, because of their large numbers, they were considered the basic forces of the Moonless Empire. 14th update. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 353. After having a preliminary understanding of the division of forces in the Moonless Empire, the Heavenly Stellar Residence's opponents in the Illusionary Moon Conference were naturally the forces in the 3rd tier. After all, the Imperial family, the 4 princes, and the 8 marquises had already obtained their own Illusionary Moon fruits, so they naturally wouldn't participate in the Illusionary Moon Conference. The Imperial family and the other upper-tier forces wouldn't participate, and the forces in the 4th tier weren't qualified. Therefore, the Illusionary Moon Conference would be held in the 3rd-tier forces. The Burning Sky Ruler was determined to obtain the Illusionary Moon fruit. This was a rare opportunity. The strongest experts in the 3rd-tier forces were only at the Dao King realm, so there was no pressure at all. With Xiao Chen's strength, the Burning Sky Ruler had absolute confidence in him. If Xiao Chen couldn't win in the same realm, then it would be a waste of the title of Bewitching Sword King. After all, Xiao Chen was the leader of the 10 great prides of the Heavenly Stellar Continent. If he couldn't even win against an empire of the Heavenly River Continent, then how could he face the top geniuses of the Heavenly River Continent? Moreover, the participants in the Illusionary Moon Conference weren't the true geniuses of the Moonless Empire. They were only the geniuses of the 3rd-tier forces, so there was naturally nothing to worry about. They quietly waited for the Illusionary Moon Conference to begin. At the same time, the various forces that were participating in the Illusionary Moon Conference had basically arrived at the Illusionary Moon City. They were all great clans that were in the 3rd echelon of the Moonless Empire, and there were almost 20 of them. Naturally, there was a difference in strength between these 20 great clans. The weaker clans merely had a single Tao King Realm expert, and they were basically at the initial stage. As for the powerful forces, they didn't only have a Tao King Realm expert, they even had someone at the perfection stage of the Tao Emperor Realm. They were only a step away from the Tao Sovereign Realm. Such forces were clearly at the peak of the third tier, and they had the chance to advance at any time and charge into the ranks of the 4 princes and 8 marquises. There were a total of 4 forces in the third tier, and they all came from the imperial capital. They were the left minister's Jiang family, the right minister's Shen family, the left general's Han family, and the right general's Yang family. Not only were these 4 families the most powerful in the third echelon, but their official positions in the empire were also second only to the 48 marquises. The head of the Jiang family was now the left prime minister, the head of the Shen family was the right prime minister, the head of the Han family was the left general, and the head of the Yang family was the right general. The patriarchs of the 4 clans were proficient in both the pen and the sword. They could be considered the overlords of the military and the imperial court. Apart from the imperial family and the 48 marquises, the 4 clans were the most powerful. Without a doubt, in this illusionary moon conference, these 4 great clans were the heavenly stellar residence's greatest enemies. The heaven realm martial artists they sent out were clearly Xiao Chen's greatest enemies. Apart from these 4 great families, the rest of the third echelon families were hardly worth mentioning. Even if they sent out celestial realm warriors, they were at most among the ranks of ordinary geniuses. Perhaps they were not even considered as heaven's chosen ones, so there was no need to care about them. He had already secretly figured out the general situation of the 4 great families. According to Xiao Chen's guess, these 4 families should send out young heaven's chosen ones, but each family would send at most 1 person. After all, even in the heavenly river continent, heaven's chosen ones were not rotten cabbages. It was impossible to casually grab a bunch of them. While Xiao Chen was guessing the overall strength of the 4 great families, in the city lord's mansion, the people of the 4 great families were gathered together. After the 4 great families arrived at Moon Trace City, they did not look for a place to stay outside. Instead, they directly stayed in the city lord's mansion. Regarding this, the city lord of Moon Trace City naturally did not dare to show the slightest dissatisfaction. The power of these 4 great families was far from what a small city lord like him could offend. They all came from the imperial capital and were officials of the same court, so the people of the 4 great families were clearly more familiar with each other. They would exchange a few pleasantries with each other. Of course, this was only on the surface. Behind the scenes, the battle between the 4 great families was ruthless. It was extremely dangerous and did not leave any leeway. At this moment, they were sitting in the garden of the city lord's mansion. The people leading the 4 great families this time were not their patriarchs, but other Tao King realm experts. As mentioned before, the Jiang, Shen, Han, and Yang families did not only have 1 Tao King realm expert. According to the rumors, the 4 great families had around 4 Tao King realm experts. Of course, this was definitely false. After all, no family would reveal their full strength. The 4 great families definitely had experts hidden in the dark. The 4 leaders of the 4 great families were 4 Tao King realm experts. 2 of them were middle-aged men, 1 was an old man, and the last was a beautiful woman. The 4 of them sat together, and the old man spoke first. This time, it seems that my Shen family is going to be at the bottom. The younger generation is useless. The old man was a Tao King realm expert of the right minister's Shen family. Although he said that, there was not a trace of disappointment in his eyes. Obviously, he was just being polite. When she heard the old man, the beautiful woman at the side smiled and said, "Elder Shen, you must be joking. Who doesn't know that your Shen family Shen Qianfeng has already broken through to the perfection of the heaven realm? Moreover, he has already entered the inner court of the Royal Academy. He's known as the strongest genius of the Shen family. With him here, I'm afraid we can only be at the bottom." The beautiful woman was a Tao King realm expert of the left minister's Jiang family. When he heard this, the old man smiled and did not say anything else. Just as Xiaochen had guessed, the Jiang, Shen, Han, and Yang families all had geniuses, and they would be participating in the illusory moon gathering this time. Although the gathering had yet to begin, from the looks of it, the four great families had clearly finished dividing the 20% of the illusory moon fruits. It was indeed so. In the past illusory moon gatherings, the biggest winners were basically the Jiang, Shen, Han, and Yang families. The other great families did not have the ability to compete with them at all. They could only watch as the four families ate the meat and left some soup for everyone else. They felt rather helpless. Especially in the recent 5 or 6 years, a genius had been born from each of the four great families. As a result, the four great families were on the verge of becoming the 4 kings and 8 marquises. At that time, the 48 marquises would probably become the 4 kings and 12 marquises. The geniuses of the four great families were the Shen family Shen Qianfeng, the Jiang families Jiang Zhuiying, the Han families Han Ping, and the Yang families Yang Fu. The 4 of them were the younger generation of the Jiang, Shen, Han, and Yang families. At such a young age, they had already broken through to the consummate level of the heaven tier and had been promoted to the inner court of the Royal Academy. Even if they were compared to the top geniuses of the 8 great marquises, they were not inferior at all. It was precisely because of this that the world believed that the Jiang, Shen, Han, and Yang families had the qualifications to become marquises. In the Moonless Empire, once one became a marquis, it would be hereditary. A marquis could at least ensure the family's prosperity for several hundred years. However, marquises were rare. Currently, the Moonless Empire only had 8 marquises, so it could be seen how difficult it was to become a marquis. 15th update. Begging to collect, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 354. Their greatest enemies were the Jiang, Shen, Han, and Yang families. As time passed day by day, it was as if in the blink of an eye, half a month had already passed. On this morning, when the sky had just begun to brighten, the entire Moon Trace City was bustling with noise and excitement. This was because today was the day that the Illusionary Moon Assembly would begin. The location of the Illusionary Moon Convention is not in the Moon Trace City, but in the Illusionary Moon Pavilion 20 li east of the city. At the same time, the Illusionary Moon Ancient Tree is also located in the Illusionary Moon Pavilion. Early in the morning, the various noble clans all left the city and rushed towards the Illusory Moon Pavilion. At the same time, in the Heavenly Stellar Residence, the Burning Sky Ruler, Xiaochen, Zhang Qi, Xikong Ming, and a Dao King Realm expert were gathered together. This time, Zhang Qi, Xikong Ming, and I won't be going. Gu Xiu, bring some people with you and follow Chener. Gu Xiu was the name of this Dao King Realm expert. In this Illusionary Moon Conference, the Burning Heaven Ruler, Zhang Qi, and Xikong Ming did not plan to show themselves. Firstly, all the powerful clans participating in the Illusionary Moon Conference only had Dao King Realm experts. Gu Xiu's perfection Dao King Realm cultivation was enough to deal with them. Secondly, the Burning Sky Ruler and the others didn't want to expose themselves too early. After all, they had just arrived at the Heavenly River continent. They couldn't casually reveal their background to others, right? For the time being, he still wanted to hide his strength. Hearing the Burning Heaven Ruler's words, Gu Xiu respectfully bowed and said, "Don't worry, my lord. This lowly one will definitely bring the Illusion Moon Fruit back. It's not just the Illusory Moon Fruit. Chener's safety cannot be the slightest bit affected. If anything happens, contact us immediately through the sound transmission talisman," said the Burning Sky Sovereign. The Illusionary Moon Fruit must be obtained. However, Xiaochen's safety must also be guaranteed. Sacrificing Xiaochen for the Illusionary Moon Fruit was a loss that the Burning Sky Ruler would not do. Xiaochen respectfully replied. After which, everyone left the Heavenly Stellar Residence and headed towards the Illusory Moon Pavilion outside the city after greeting the Burning Sky Ruler. Gu Xiu did not bring many people. He only brought 2 Dao Querying Realm martial artists with him. Including Xiaochen, there were a total of 4 people. 20 miles was not a long distance. Under Gu Xiu's guidance, the 4 of them quickly arrived outside the illusory moon pavilion. Although it was called the illusory moon pavilion, it was more like a huge villa. It was surrounded by white walls, and there was only one main entrance for people to enter and exit. At the same time, perhaps to protect the illusory moon ancient tree, the entire illusory moon pavilion was enveloped by a formation. It was said that this formation was specially arranged by the Moonless Empire's royal family, and its grade was at the peak of the heaven grade. There was already a group of Imperial guards standing guard at the entrance. Anyone who entered had to show an invitation letter, and the number of people in the group could not exceed 7. Among them, there were also 3 heaven-tier martial artists who had participated in the battle. When they arrived at the entrance of the illusory moon pavilion, Gu Xiu showed his invitation letter. Next, the Imperial guard in charge of the inspection gave the 4 of them a once-over. When he discovered that only Xiaochen was at the Sky Human stage, the Imperial guard asked suspiciously, "You are only sending one person to fight?" "That's right." Hearing the Imperial guard's words, Gu Xiu nodded and replied. Sending only one person to fight? This was really strange. After all, there were 3 slots. As such, there was naturally no one who did not use up the slots. After all, one more person meant one more chance of victory. Even the Jiang, Shen, Han, and Yang families had sent 3 heaven-tier martial artists, but this heavenly stellar residence had only sent one person to fight. The Imperial Guard was puzzled by the heavenly stellar residence's strange actions. Moreover, when did this heavenly stellar residence appear? It seemed that there was no such force in the Moonless Empire before, right? Moreover, there were even Dao King realm martial artists overseeing it. Although he was puzzled, it was not a big problem. The reason these Imperial Guards were here was only for one purpose, and that was to confirm the authenticity of the invitation letter. Since Xiaochen and the others' invitation letters were real, they could naturally let them pass. They successfully entered the illusory moon pavilion. Looking around, the entire illusory moon pavilion's environment was extremely beautiful. There was no front or back courtyard, and the entire illusory moon pavilion could be seen at a glance. In the courtyard, there were several man-made creeks. The water in the creeks was clear, and beautiful koi fish swam back and forth in the water. Beside these creeks, there were many beautiful pavilions standing in great numbers. This was the first time they had seen such beautiful buildings after arriving at the heavenly river continent. Moreover, they were built with wood. No wonder this place is called the illusory moon pavilion, Xiaochen said with a smile after looking around the surroundings. They had already arranged their seats according to the invitation letter. Every force could have a pavilion. For this illusory moon conference, the imperial family had also mobilized thousands of maids to the illusory moon pavilion. They were specifically responsible for serving the people of the various forces. Seeing Xiaochen and the others walk through the door, a rather good-looking maid respectfully came up to them and said, "Are you the lords from the heavenly stellar residence?" It was obvious that she already knew the identities of Xiaochen and the others. As soon as she finished speaking, the maid led Xiaochen and the others to one of the pavilions. Because the heavenly stellar residence was a new force, although it had a Dao King realm expert, its status in the Moonless Empire could not be compared to the other powerful clans. Therefore, the pavilion Xiaochen and the others were in was arranged in the outer area of the illusory moon pavilion. It was a little far from the center of the illusory moon pavilion. However, Xiaochen did not care about this. In any case, as long as he could obtain the illusory moon fruit, nothing else mattered. He sat down in the pavilion. There were many spirit fruits and fine wine on the table. He first poured a cup for Gu Xiu and the others before pouring a cup for himself. Gu Xiu and the others were rather fearful when Xiaochen poured wine for them. However, Xiaochen did not mind at all. After taking a small sip of the wine, Xiaochen smiled. "This is not bad. It's fragrant and mellow. Good wine, good wine." He was rather full of praise for the taste of the wine. However, just as Xiaochen finished speaking, an irritating voice rang out. Country bumpkin. You haven't even drunk the imperial capital's sake. Heh, what a country bumpkin. As the voice rang out, Xiaochen saw Wuda striding over with a single glance. In the beginning, he was rather surprised. With the Wu clan's strength, they should not be able to participate in the illusory moon gathering because there was no Dao King realm expert in the Wu clan. So, why was Wuda here? When he met Wuda again, Xiaochen could clearly sense a wisp of dense hatred in his eyes. Obviously, this fellow was still thinking about how to take revenge on him. After putting away the doubts in his heart, a wisp of coldness flashed through Xiaochen's eyes. This fellow really doesn't give up. I don't want to pay attention to him, but he just has to circle around me like a fly. It's really quite annoying. 16th update. Please collect, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 355. Xiaochen had almost forgotten about Wuda's existence, but now that he appeared in front of him, he clearly didn't think that Wuda was here for a stroll. The Wu family wasn't qualified to participate in the Illusionary Moon Conference, but Wuda was here. The only explanation was that Wuda wasn't here to participate in the Illusionary Moon Conference. Since this guy wasn't here to participate in the Illusionary Moon Conference, there was only one possibility left. Revenge, revenge. A faint killing intent emerged in his heart. Xiaochen didn't put Wuda in his heart from the beginning to the end. He also didn't think that Wuda could bring any danger to him. Although there wasn't any danger, it was still unpleasant to be remembered by someone. He originally thought that if Wuda gave up, he wouldn't pursue the matter. But now, it seemed that Wuda wanted to fight to the death. Xiaochen looked at Wuda calmly. He already had the intention to kill him. This guy was very annoying, and the best way to deal with him was to kill him with one palm. As if he saw the killing intent in Xiaochen's eyes, Wuda sneered and said, "What? You want to kill me? This is the Illusionary Moon Conference, do you dare to make a move?" Ha! In the face of Xiaochen's killing intent, Wuda did not show the slightest bit of fear. On the contrary, he laughed loudly. Along with his laughter, Wuda turned around and left. As he walked away, he said, "Boy, no one has ever had a good ending after offending me." Watching Wuda leave, Xiaochen didn't make a move. The goal of this trip was the Illusionary Moon Fruit. How could he lose the big picture because of Wuda? His expression was calm and he didn't put Wuda in his heart. Although Xiaochen had guessed that Wuda definitely had some tricks up his sleeve, he didn't care. How could an ant jump around? He was just an ant. Once the Illusionary Moon Conference was over, Xiaochen would have plenty of time to deal with Wuda. King Bewitching Sword, once this matter is over, I'm willing to personally wipe out the Wang family. Xiaochen didn't say anything, but Gu Xiu took the initiative to say that he was willing to wipe out the Wang family. There was anger in Gu Xiu's heart. In Gu Xiu's opinion, a small family dared to be disrespectful to Xiaochen. They were simply courting death. Hearing Gu Xiu's words, Xiaochen smiled faintly and said, "There's no rush. Let's get the Illusionary Moon Fruit first. This is something that Uncle Tian wants. We can't make any mistakes. Otherwise, wouldn't Uncle Tian be angry? Everything would have to wait until he obtained the Illusionary Moon Fruit." Upon hearing Xiaochen's words, Gu Xiu nodded. While Xiaochen and Gu Xiu were talking, Wuda's elder sister, Wu Yun, was talking to a fair-skinned young man in a pavilion in the center of the Illusory Moon Pavilion. If there were outsiders present, they would definitely recognize this young man as the prodigy of the Han clan, one of the four patriarchs, Han Ping. Looking at Han Ping, Wu Yun smiled and said, "Senior brother Han Ping, this matter is settled. None of the participating members of the Heavenly Stellar Residence shall remain." The two of them were both disciples of the Imperial Capital's Royal Academy, so they knew each other. In addition, Wu Yun was the third prince's woman, so Han Ping was more polite to Wu Yun. This time, Wu Yun had something to ask of him. She wanted him to help her kill all the participants of the Heavenly Stellar Residence during the martial arts competition. Han Ping agreed without even thinking about it. He had never heard of the Heavenly Stellar Residence before. From Wu Yun's words, he knew that it was a new faction in Moontrace City. Naturally, Han Ping did not think that the dustless residence was very strong. With his identity as the prodigy of the Han clan, killing them was just a matter of raising his hand. Looking at Wu Yun, Han Ping smiled and said, "Junior sister, don't worry. It's a piece of cake." After receiving Han Ping's agreement, Wu Yun bowed slightly and personally sent Han Ping off. In the end, Wu Yun felt that if she only relied on Han Ping, there would be an accident. So, she went to the Shin clan's Shin Qianfeng, the Jiang clan's Jiang Zhuiying, and the Yang clan's Yang Fu. Just like Han Ping, Wu Yun also asked the three of them to directly kill the participants of the Heavenly Stellar Residence during the martial arts competition. Hearing Wu Yun's request, the three of them also agreed without the slightest hesitation. A new faction was simply not worthy of their attention. Moreover, they could make Wu Yun owe them a favor this time. It was absolutely beneficial, so the three of them naturally had no reason to refuse. Having the prodigies of the Jiang clan, Shin clan, Han clan, and Yang clan simultaneously kill Xiao Chen, Wu Yun finally relaxed. After sending off the Yang clan's prodigy, Yang Fu, Wu Yun returned to the pavilion. From the second floor, a young man wearing a purple gold embroidered robe slowly walked down. The young man's appearance could not be considered very handsome, but his aura was very domineering. Although he was young, he already had the appearance of an emperor. Just from the aura of an emperor that he was born with, it was not difficult to guess that the young man was the host of the Illusionary Moon competition, the third prince, Chu Wuming. As the third son of the current emperor, Chu Wuming was also a strong contender for the throne in the future. Smiling at Wu Yun, Chu Wuming softly laughed and said, "What, do you have some enmity with the Heavenly Stellar Residence? You didn't hesitate to have Yang Fu and the others attack at the same time." He clearly knew what Wu Yun had done, but seeing Chu Wuming like this, he didn't care. After all, not to mention an unknown Heavenly Stellar Residence, even the Jiang, Shen, Han, and Yang clans were nothing in Chu Wuming's eyes. Chu Wuming naturally wouldn't care about such a small battle. Hearing Chu Wuming's words, Wu Yun slowly walked to his side and revealed an obedient expression. "Isn't it because of my little brother? He was bullied outside, so as his older sister, I naturally can't not help him. Your Highness wouldn't be angry with me, right? Ha, you little girl, how could I blame you for such a small matter? It's just that the competition between me, big brother, and second brother is becoming more and more intense. It has almost reached an irreconcilable point, so you should try not to cause any trouble during this period of time." Hearing Wu Yun's words, Chu Wuming laughed. "I understand." Wu Yun meekly nodded. "Okay, it's about time. Let's go, it's time for me to show myself." However, everyone has waited for too long. All the clans participating in the Illusionary Moon Conference had already arrived. Everyone sat in their respective pavilions. Following the appearance of Chu Wuming, who wore a purple gold python robe, everyone's gazes instantly gathered on him. Standing on the balcony of the second floor of the Illusionary Moon Pavilion, Chu Wuming could see every single movement in the Illusionary Moon Pavilion. At the same time, the people from the various large clans, no matter which angle they were at, could also see Chu Wuming. Standing on the balcony with a calm expression, with Wu Yun by his side, Chu Wuming scanned the various large clans below him and spoke with a slight smile. "Everyone, this junior has been ordered to host this year's Illusionary Moon Conference. If there is anything that I have not done well, I hope that everyone will forgive me. 17th update, begging for collections, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 356. As soon as he appeared, he humbly referred to himself as a junior. Although he was the third prince of the empire, Chu Wuming did not give off a domineering aura at all. Only the domineering aura that came from his bloodline could not be concealed. Looking at Chu Wuming on the balcony of the attic, Xiao Chen, who was sitting in the pavilion, smiled and said, "This third prince is quite interesting. He gives people the feeling that he is already beginning to have the bearing of an emperor, but he is incomparably humble when dealing with people. In front of the various great clans, he is probably going to win over a lot of people with this move." Xiaochen had a very high opinion of Chu Wuming. As expected, as soon as Xiaochen finished speaking, the various clans all stood up and bowed. The Dao kings from the Jiang, Shen, Han, and Yang clans took the lead and bowed towards Chu Wuming respectfully. "Your Highness is too polite. It's our fortune to have Your Highness personally host the Illusionary Moon Conference this time. Thank you for your praise. Please sit, quickly sit. I won't waste your time. The Illusionary Moon Conference will begin immediately. Men, bring the Illusionary Moon fruits." Chu Wuming warmly invited everyone to sit down before calling out to the Imperial Guards behind him. With Chu Wuming's words, the Illusionary Moon Conference officially began. Very soon, several Imperial Guards escorted a tray of over 100 Illusionary Moon fruits to Chu Wuming. As everyone knew, the Illusionary Moon tree only bore fruit once every 100 years. Every time it bore fruit, the Tianfeng Zone would directly take 40%, which was 200 fruits. The imperial family would take another 20%, which was 100 fruits. In the end, the 4 princes and 8 dukes each took 10%, so another 100 fruits were taken away. Only then would the remaining 20 be divided amongst the various clans. The 100 Illusionary Moon fruits in front of them were the goals of the various large families. Looking at the last 20% of the Illusionary Moon fruits, the various large families present all revealed fiery expressions. This was especially so for the Jiang, Shen, Han, and Yang families. They were the strongest among the various large families, so they naturally obtained the most Illusionary Moon fruits. Like everyone else, Xiaochen also stared at the Illusionary Moon fruits. They did not seem special from their outer appearance, just like ordinary spiritual fruits. However, a clear crescent moon mark could be seen on every single one of them. Under everyone's gazes, Chu Wuming said loudly, "I'm sure everyone knows the rules. Let's begin. I wonder which genius will be the first to challenge everyone." The rules of the Illusionary Moon Conference were very simple. In front of the pavilion where Chu Wuming was, there was a battle stage. The Heaven Realm contestants of the various clans could all step onto the stage. Every victory would allow them to obtain an Illusionary Moon fruit. The Illusionary Moon Conference would end when all the contestants from the various clans were defeated. The rules were somewhat similar to the rules of defending the stage. Hearing Chu Wuming's words, a short, dark-skinned young man quickly stepped onto the stage. As the first person to step onto the stage, Shen Qianfeng and the other 3 geniuses all smiled in disdain. This guy was obviously courting death. As the dark-skinned young man stepped onto the stage, his opponent soon appeared. It was a Heaven Realm martial artist from another clan. The 2 sides stood opposite each other on the stage. Immediately after, they bowed towards each other and started fighting. The conference had just begun. At this time, those who stepped onto the stage would obviously not be experts. Looking at the battle between the 2 on the stage, Xiaochen revealed a faint smile. The strength of these 2 people was very ordinary. There was nothing special about them. Basically, the first to step onto the stage would not be experts. 3 consecutive battles ended. As Xiaochen expected, no one was able to win consecutively in these 3 battles. Basically, all of them won one battle, but were quickly defeated by others. However, even so, being able to win one battle was already enough to make their clans beam with joy. Because winning a battle meant that they would obtain an Illusionary Moon seed. Sitting on the balcony of the pavilion, Chu Wuming kept a smile on his face as he looked at the battle below. At the same time, in the pavilion where Xiaochen and the others were at, seeing that Xiaochen still had no intention to step up, Gu Xiu, who was beside him, said with some doubt, "Bewitching Sword King, are we still not going to make a move?" After watching 3 battles in a row, Gu Xiu had a clearer understanding of the participants from the various clans. Almost all of them were from the younger generation. However, in terms of strength, none of them could compare with Xiaochen. Not to mention comparing, these people would not even be able to take one move from Xiaochen. There was no pressure in such a battle, but Xiaochen had no intention to step up. Seeing that the Illusionary Moon fruits were obtained by the other clans, Gu Xiu asked, Hearing Gu Xiu's words, Xiaochen smiled and said, "Don't be anxious. Now is not the time to step up. After all, we still have to stay in the Moonless Empire for a long time. If we offend all the clans, wouldn't we be looking for trouble? Moreover, the Illusionary Moon Conference also has its own rules. It was not the time to step up. The Illusionary Moon Conference also had its own rules." Hearing Xiaochen's words, Gu Xiu's face was filled with doubt. Clearly, he did not see any clues. Seeing Gu Xiu's confusion, Xiaochen explained while watching the battle on the stage. "From the start of the battle until now, have you seen anyone from the Jiang, Shen, Han, and Yang clans step up? No. Then it's fine. Although the Illusionary Moon Conference is for the various clans to compete for the last 20% of the Illusionary Moon fruits, there should be some unwritten rules. For example, right now, it's all for the weaker clans. If my guess is correct, the Illusionary Moon Conference should be divided into 2 stages. 2 stages? That's right. The first stage is for the weaker clans to compete. In this stage, powerful clans like Jiang Shen and Han Yang cannot step up. After all, if they were to step up, then the weaker clans would not even be able to obtain a single Illusionary Moon fruit. Therefore, this first stage is a stage specially prepared for these weak families. Why is that?" Hearing Xiaochen's words, Gu Xiu was even more confused. Since they had the strength, why would they give the weaker clans a chance? Wouldn't it be fine to just take them all? Seeing that Gu Xiu still did not understand what he meant, Xiaochen lightly smiled and simply said, "You must know that it's difficult to offend the anger of the masses. Everyone has rushed over from afar. If only a few clans can obtain the Illusionary Moon fruit, then what about the other clans? Moreover, if only a few clans can obtain the Illusionary Moon fruit during every Illusionary Moon Conference, then wouldn't that go against the Imperial family's original intention of holding the Illusionary Moon Conference?" It was difficult to offend the anger of the masses. Hearing Xiaochen's words, Gu Xiu revealed a pondering expression. Seeing this, Xiaochen did not speak any further. Now was indeed not the time to step up. If they did, then it would be breaking the rules. Not only would it cause the rage of the masses, it would also cause the Imperial family to be displeased. Although everyone had ruler Blazing Heaven by their side, the Imperial family similarly had a Tao Emperor realm expert. 18th update. Begging to be collected, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 357. Unless it was a last resort, Xiaochen obviously wouldn't go and become enemies with the Moonless Empire's Imperial family. First of all, everyone would rather leave their homes and come to the Heavenly River continent to gain experience and find the possibility of a breakthrough, not to risk their lives. If they were to become enemies with the Moonless Empire's Imperial family for no reason, they could only fight in the end, and as long as there was a fight, people would definitely die. After all, the 50,000 people who went to the Heavenly River continent were the hope of the Heavenly River continent. If more than half of them died in the Heavenly River continent, then who would save the Heavenly River continent? Moreover, Xiaochen and the others still didn't know how strong the Moonless Empire's Imperial family was. In any case, what they could be sure of now was that the Moonless Empire's Imperial family definitely had a Tao Emperor Realm Almighty overseeing it. The best situation was that there was only one Tao Emperor Realm Almighty. In this way, although the strength of Xiaochen and the others still couldn't contend against the Moonless Empire's Imperial family, they could still make them fear them because of the existence of the Burning Sky Ruler. But what if there was more than one Tao Emperor Realm Almighty in the Imperial family? Then rashly becoming enemies with the Imperial family was obviously courting death. Therefore, in the face of many things, Xiaochen and the others could only follow the rules of the Moonless Empire. For example, in the Illusionary Moon Conference, Xiaochen definitely had the strength to take all the Illusionary Moon fruits, but he couldn't do so. Firstly, this would offend all the clans present, and secondly, it would definitely arouse the dissatisfaction of the Imperial family. In order to grow and gain experience in the completely unfamiliar Heavenly River continent, the first thing to do was to integrate into the system of the Heavenly River continent. Otherwise, as an outsider, if he wasn't accepted by the native forces of the Heavenly River continent, how could he gain experience and grow? At that time, he probably wouldn't even be able to get a single hair. An entire day had passed, and 40 battles had already been carried out. So far, a total of 40 illusionary moon fruits had been taken by the various clans. At this point, Xiaochen found that the weaker clans had basically stopped fighting. Regardless of whether there were still Celestial Realm warriors in their clans who had not been defeated, they had all wisely chosen not to fight. The first stage of the competition seemed to have ended. As expected, the clans that had yet to participate in the next battle also sent their representatives onto the stage. The first stage was to take out 40 illusionary moon fruits and distribute them to the weaker families. This way, the imperial family's goal of winning people's hearts would be achieved, and the remaining 60 illusionary moon fruits would be fought over by the stronger families. Such an operation was indeed acceptable to all the major clans. Looking at the Celestial Realm warrior who had once again stepped onto the stage, Xiaochen could already feel something different about him, even though he had yet to make a move. Compared to those who had stepped onto the stage before, this person's strength was obviously stronger and had already stepped into the ranks of geniuses. Along with this person's appearance, a Celestial Realm warrior from the Yang family stepped out. The two of them quickly engaged in a fierce battle in the arena. The result of the battle was as expected. The Celestial Realm warrior from the Yang family quickly won. Seeing that even the 4 major clans had made their move, Xiaochen slowly stood up and smiled at Gu Xiu beside him. Now is the time. As he spoke, Xiaochen had already stepped out of the pavilion. Following Xiaochen's exit, the members of the major clans all cast their gazes toward Xiaochen. There were a total of 18 clans that came to participate in the Illusionary Moon Conference. Including the Heavenly Stellar Residents, there were 19. However, facing the Heavenly Stellar Residents that they had never heard of, the major clans present were filled with doubts. When did this Heavenly Stellar Residents appear? The majority of the clans were filled with curiosity towards the Heavenly Stellar Residents. However, in the eyes of Shen Qianfeng and the other 3, the Celestial Realm warrior from the Heavenly Stellar Residence had finally made his move. For a moment, a cold glint flashed across their eyes. Previously, Wu Yun had already sought them out one by one, requesting them to kill the Heavenly Stellar Residence's warrior. Now, the opportunity had finally arrived. Immediately, Yang Fu gave a meaningful glance to the Yang family warrior on the arena. Seeing this, the Yang family warrior also nodded slightly in response. Not only Yang Fu, even Wu Yun and Chu Wuming, who were on the rooftop of the pavilion, also locked their gazes on Xiaochen. When she saw Xiaochen for the first time, Wu Yun was immediately stunned. In her heart, she thought, is this the tyrannical person that Wu Da spoke of who beat me up? She didn't know why, but Wu Yun's intuition told her that Xiaochen was definitely not that kind of person. She had never felt such a temperament from anyone of the same generation. Although the feeling that Xiaochen gave Wu Yun was not as tyrannical as Chu Wuming, there was a kind of ethereal feeling. To possess such an extraordinary temperament, Xiaochen was obviously not a simple person. How could such a person do those things that Wu Da spoke of? Wu Yun also didn't know why, but she couldn't help but have a bad feeling in her heart. She felt that agreeing to Wu Da's request to avenge him was a wrong choice. She shouldn't have listened to Wu Da's one-sided words and offended Xiaochen for no reason. A trace of regret appeared in her heart out of nowhere. However, the arrow on the bow had to be released. Wu Yun had already personally asked Shen Qianfeng and the other 3. Even if she wanted to go back on her words now, it was impossible. In contrast to Wu Yun's uneasiness, Chu Wuming's face was filled with excitement. His gaze was similarly fixed on Xiaochen as he unconsciously said in a soft voice, I never thought that such a small Yuetian city would actually have such a person. Why have I never heard of him before? Chu Wuming's eyes were clearly more shrewd than Wu Yun's. Just from Xiaochen's temperament, Chu Wuming could be sure that this person was definitely not a person of the pond. He could even be compared to the 2 abnormal people beside his big brother and second brother. One must know that for the sake of the throne, Chu Wuming and his 2 brothers had been constantly roping in various factions. As for his big brother and second brother, he didn't know what method they used to actually find two core disciples from Tianfeng's zone. Chu Wuming had seen those two people before. Although they were about the same age as him and their cultivations were also similar, Chu Wuming also felt a lot of pressure when facing them. Moreover, although those two people were here to help his big brother and second brother, Chu Wuming knew that his big brother and second brother's attitude towards them was extremely respectful, completely treating them as equals. Compared to his two brothers, Chu Wuming's current strength could be said to be the weakest. Although he had some extraordinary heaven's prides by his side, if compared to the two core disciples of Tianfeng Zone, they were far inferior. It was also because of this that Chu Wuming had fallen into an increasingly disadvantageous position in the fight for the throne. He never thought that he would actually meet such an outstanding person here. The first impression that Xiaochen gave to Chu Wuming was that he was not the slightest bit inferior to the two abnormal people by his two brothers' side. 19th update. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 358. His eyes were filled with surprise and anticipation as he looked at Xiaochen, who was slowly walking up the stage. To be honest, the current situation in the Moonless Empire was very chaotic, especially in the imperial capital. The source of all this chaos was the struggle between Chu Wuming and the other princes. The current emperor of the Moonless Empire had a total of 9 sons and 8 daughters, but until now, there had been no crown prince. The position of crown prince had not been confirmed yet, so naturally, the various princes had launched an open and covert struggle. However, although there were 9 princes, from the current situation, there were only 3 who had the ability to compete for the position of crown prince. They were Chu Wuming and his 2 elder brothers. As for the other 6 princes, they had already withdrawn from the struggle for the position of crown prince and successively attached themselves to Chu Wuming and his 2 elder brothers. However, although Chu Wuming was also one of the strong contenders for the position of crown prince, there were many things that only the people in the circle knew. Compared to his 2 elder brothers, Chu Wuming was almost on the verge of being eliminated. This was because among the 3 of them, Chu Wuming's influence was the smallest, and he was not on the same level as his 2 elder brothers. He was already completely at a disadvantage, and could even be considered as being eliminated. However, Chu Wuming was not willing to accept this, so when he saw Xiaochen, Chu Wuming was so excited. In his opinion, Xiaochen was the good horse that he had always dreamed of. As long as he had Xiaochen, he, Chu Wuming, would no longer need to be afraid of the 2 freaks beside his 2 elder brothers. Just as Chu Wuming was looking at Xiaochen in surprise, Wu Yun, who was beside him, saw that his face was in a daze. She called out Chu Wuming several times, but there was no response. Wu Yun gently pulled Chu Wuming's sleeve, making him come back to his senses. "What's wrong with your highness? Are you feeling unwell?" Hearing Wu Yun's words, Chu Wuming came back to his senses. However, he did not care about anything else and immediately said to Wu Yun in an extremely serious manner, "You can't touch this person. I will not let anyone hurt this person. Do you understand?" Chu Wuming already knew that Wu Yun wanted to kill Xiaochen. Before seeing Xiaochen, Chu Wuming did not care. However, after seeing Xiaochen, Chu Wuming instantly regretted it. He absolutely could not let Xiaochen get hurt, and even more so, he could not let Xiaochen bear a grudge against him. Hearing Chu Wuming, she was extremely intelligent since childhood. How could she not see that Chu Wuming already had the intention of recruiting Xiaochen? It could even be said that it was to the point of thirst for talent. She already had a bad feeling in her heart, but since things had already come to this, Wu Yun herself could not change anything. It was impossible for her to send someone to tell Shen Qianfeng and the others not to make a move on Xiaochen, right? Obviously, this was not possible. After pondering for a while, Wu Yun finally came up with a plan. She looked at Chu Wuming and said, "Your Highness, don't be anxious. This person's temperament is indeed extraordinary, but as for his strength, why don't we first watch him fight a few rounds before deciding?" Hearing Wu Yun's words, Chu Wuming gradually calmed down. Although his gaze was still locked onto Xiaochen, he still agreed with Wu Yun's suggestion. Yes, yes, yes. It's not too late to make a decision after seeing this person's strength. Unaware of Chu Wuming's thoughts, Xiaochen had already arrived on the stage. Looking at the white-clothed Xiaochen, the Yang family disciple who was also standing on the stage had an undisguised killing intent in his eyes as he coldly said, "You shouldn't have come on stage. This illusionary moon conference doesn't prohibit killing. As long as you're on the stage, your life and death are up to fate." Thinking that he had already defeated Xiaochen, Xiaochen did not get angry when he felt the killing intent of this Yang family disciple. Instead, he smiled and said, "I don't think we know each other, right? We have no enmity, yet you want to kill me?" He did not know this Yang family disciple at all, but he wanted to kill him. The killing intent emitted from his body did not seem fake, which meant that this person really wanted to kill him. Hearing Xiaochen's words, this Yang family disciple did not avoid it. He used a voice that only the two of them could hear and said, "If you want to blame someone, you can only blame yourself for offending someone you shouldn't have offended. In your next life, you should be more clear-eyed." Offending someone I shouldn't have offended? Xiaochen understood what was going on after hearing that. This person was obviously ordered by someone to kill him. As for who ordered him, he didn't need to think to know that it was definitely related to Wu De. After all, in the Sky River continent, the only person who had a conflict with him was Wu De. Moreover, Wu De had appeared in front of him just now. As such, everything made sense. Wu De had been secretly plotting to kill him in the illusionary moon conference. Sneering in his heart, Xiaochen said to this Yang family disciple, "Before you make a move, let me give you a piece of advice. When you kill someone, you must be prepared to be killed. Now, you have one last chance. Once you make a move, you will die." Xiaochen did not have any enmity with this Yang family disciple, so before he made a move, he could still give him a chance to back out. However, in the face of Xiaochen's offer, this Yang family disciple obviously did not appreciate it. He sneered and said, "You're about to die and you're still talking nonsense here." Saying that, this Yang family disciple had already thrown a punch at Xiaochen. He did not listen to Xiaochen's warning at all. With this punch, his life was destined to come to an end. He did not hold back in the slightest. Seeing this Yang family disciple suddenly go berserk and use a killing move as soon as he made a move, the surrounding great families were all shocked. It's the Yang family's blood tiger fist. He uses a killing move as soon as he makes a move. Does this child want to kill someone? Even the onlookers could see that this Yang family disciple was about to kill someone. In the loft, Chu Wuming also abruptly stood up at this moment, his eyes glaring fiercely at Wu Yun as he said in a cold voice, "Is this also your doing?" Chu Wuming did not expect that this Yang family disciple would immediately try to kill someone and berate Wu Yun. Just as he was about to speak up to stop him, what he and everyone else did not expect was that Xiaochen, who was facing the Yang family disciple's ferocious punch, actually gently pointed his finger at him. Xiaochen did not seem to make any movements, but as soon as he pointed his finger, a golden sword light suddenly shot out. The pure June sword finger was instantly displayed. The golden sword light was as fast as lightning, and in the blink of an eye, the sword light had already pierced through the Yang family disciple's forehead. This Yang family disciple, who was about to go berserk a second ago, fell directly to the ground 3 steps in front of Xiaochen. Until his death, this Yang family disciple's eyes were still filled with confusion. Perhaps even until his death, he still could not figure out who was the real ant between him and Xiaochen. 20th update, please bookmark, please recommend. Chapter 359. Looking at the Yang family disciple who had fallen to the ground, everyone present was stunned. Only Gu Xiu and the other 2 who came with Xiaochen were able to remain calm. They were well aware of Xiaochen's strength. In the Heavenly Qin continent, he was known as the leader of the 10 Prides. It would be strange if any random person could compete with Xiaochen. Therefore, from the beginning, Gu Xiu and the other 2 already knew the outcome. The Yang family disciple could be said to have brought about his own death. However, while Gu Xiu and the other 2 knew Xiaochen's strength, the others were completely stunned. What was going on? The Yang family disciple who was attacking ferociously just now was killed with a single finger. This wasn't a joke, right? No one had expected the result to be like this. Countless pairs of eyes stared at Xiaochen. It was hard to imagine how this handsome young man with an extraordinary temperament could be so strong. Even the third prince, Chu Wuming, who was in the loft, was stunned. Originally, he had planned to step forward to stop this battle, but Xiao Chen's performance had greatly exceeded his expectations. Chu Wushuang had seen the Yang family disciple before. Although they had not had much interaction, he had heard of some of this person's deeds. Although he could not compare to the Yang family's heaven's pride Yang Fu, he was definitely not an ordinary character. But even so, he could not even withstand a single blow from Xiao Chen. With an unconcealable fire in his eyes, Chu Wuming did not speak again, but his expression had already explained everything. Xiao Chen was the person he had been looking for, a peerless monster who could help him contend against his two older brothers. Unlike Chu Wushuang, Wu Yun's face was already ashen. Xiao Chen had killed the Yang family disciple with a single finger. It seemed that even Yang Fu and the other three were not a match for Xiao Chen. In the battle just now, if Yang Fu and the other three were to fight the Yang family disciple, although they could have won in the end, it would definitely not have been as easy as this. With just a simple finger, he had killed the Yang family disciple. She was already thoroughly regretting it. Wu Yun did not know how Wu De had provoked someone like Xiao Chen, who had such battle strength at such a young age. From the looks of it, Xiao Chen had not even used his full strength. It could be said that with Xiao Chen's talent, even in the imperial capital's Imperial Academy, he could definitely squeeze into the top level. Wu Yun's heart was filled with regret. She was constantly thinking of ways to make up for it. At this moment, she no longer dared to think about how to deal with Xiao Chen. Instead, she was thinking about how to make Xiao Chen forgive her and her brother. How could Wu Yun, who had always been extremely intelligent, not know that it would not be long before Xiao Chen knew that it was Wu De who wanted to kill him? Once Xiao Chen knew the truth, with Xiao Chen's talent and strength, how could he let Wu De go? Perhaps even the entire Wu family would be implicated. As for Wu Yun's biggest backer, the third prince Chu Wuming, just by looking at his current appearance, she already knew the answer. Forget about asking Chu Wuming to deal with Xiao Chen, it would already be good if he did not turn around and help Xiao Chen destroy the Wu family. The most merciless royal family. Even though Wu Yun had always been deeply loved by Chu Wuming, she was very clear that between Xiao Chen and herself, Chu Wushuang would definitely choose Xiao Chen. This was because it concerned his position as the crown prince. Compared to the crown prince's position, she, Wu Yun, was just an ordinary woman who could not be more ordinary. She could no longer count on Chu Wushuang. She even had to be careful of Chu Wushuang, in order to curry favor with Xiao Chen, and make an example out of the Wu family. Like Wu Yun, Wu De, who had been hiding in a pavilion far away, was also in a daze. Compared to his sister Wu Yun, Wu De was completely scared out of his wits. Only now did Wu De realize that he had probably gotten himself into big trouble. Suddenly, Wu De recalled the words of his housekeeper, Wu Fu. If we can't find out their identities, then there's another possibility. Their identities have already surpassed the limits of what the Wu family can come into contact with. This level has probably already come into contact with the hallowed sect. Wu De sat in a daze on the chair. He felt that even breathing had become difficult. At this moment, Wu De wanted to flee. He wanted to flee far, far away. However, it was as if his legs did not belong to him. He could not even stand up. The entire illusory moon pavilion was silent. However, Yang Fu's face was filled with rage. When he saw his family's genius being killed by a single finger from Xiao Chen, Yang Fu had long since been unable to restrain himself from entering the arena and fighting Xiao Chen. However, just as Yang Fu was about to stand up, he was forcefully pulled back by the Yang clan's Dao King expert by his side. "Second uncle, what are you doing? He killed a member of our Yang clan. Are we just going to let it go like this?" The Dao King expert of the Yang clan this time was Yang Fu's second uncle. Being stopped by his second uncle, Yang Fu roared furiously. the Yang clan's second uncle did not reply to Yang Fu's furious roar. He only pressed Yang Fu firmly onto the chair. His gaze was locked onto Xiaochen from beginning to end. After a long while, the Yang clan's second uncle looked at Yang Fu and said, "Can you win if you go up? This person is no longer someone you can deal with. Although I can't see through him, I can guarantee that he's definitely in existence on the same level as the two freaks beside the first prince and second prince." Hearing his second uncle's words, the furious Yang Fu was first stunned. However, he soon exclaimed in disbelief, "How is that possible? Those two are the core disciples of Tianfeng Zone." Yang Fu found it hard to accept that his second uncle had compared Xiaochen to the two core disciples of the Heavenly Wind Holy Sect. Although Yang Fu had never seen the two of them before, it was not difficult to judge their battle prowess based on the various rumors in the imperial capital. Killing Dao querying realm martial artists with the cultivation of the celestial realm was such a shocking thing. How could Xiaochen be compared to those two freaks? He did not believe his second uncle's words. Regarding this, the Yang clan's second uncle did not argue. He still said in a low voice, "If you insist on fighting, I won't stop you. However, I can guarantee that you will die within 3 moves. Moreover, look at the third prince's expression. Who do you think can touch him today?" The old saying was true. The Yang clan's second uncle's observation skills were indeed incomparably shrewd. He even saw the changes in the third prince's expression. However, this Yang clan's second uncle was wrong about one thing. That was, if Yang Fu dared to challenge Xiaochen, he would not die within 3 moves. Instead, he would die within 1 move. Xiaochen would not need 3 moves to kill Yang Fu because Yang Fu was just a top genius. He was not even considered a peerless genius. Hearing his second uncle's words, Yang Fu's gaze turned to Chu Wuming on the pavilion with a gloomy expression. At the same time, seeing that no one came up to challenge him for a long time, Xiaochen on the battle stage also spoke up. "Is there no one coming up to fight?" 21st update, please bookmark, please recommend. Chapter 360. Is there no one else who wants to fight? Seeing that no one else stepped onto the stage for a long time, Xiaochen shouted. Now that he had only won 1 match, if no one else stepped onto the stage, how could he obtain the Fantasy Moon Fruit? Hearing Xiaochen's words, the various families present all looked at each other and chose to remain silent. What a joke, you killed the Yang family's genius with a single finger. Such a bloody scene was right in front of them. Who would dare to step onto the stage? The various families did not know why Xiaochen had killed the Yang family's disciple. In addition, the Heavenly Stellar Residence was a new force, so they did not know the depths of the Heavenly Stellar Residence. They all thought that Xiaochen was a bloodthirsty person, so naturally, no one dared to step onto the stage. No one dared to step onto the stage again, and the atmosphere became somewhat awkward for a while. The 18 great families of the Moonless Empire had actually been intimidated by a single young man, and no one dared to challenge him. If news of this were to spread, it would indeed cause the various families to lose face. Seeing that it was obviously not a good idea to continue like this, the atmosphere became even more awkward. Fortunately, at this moment, Chu Wuming opened his mouth and broke the awkward situation. Chu Wuming cupped his hands towards Xiaochen and said with a smile, "I didn't expect to see such a young hero today. May I ask what this friend's name is?" As Chu Wuming spoke, Xiaochen also cupped his hands towards him and said calmly, "This one is Xiaochen. Brother Xiaochen, good. Today, this one's horizons have been broadened. Brother Xiaochen's strength has really surprised me," Chu Wuming said to Xiaochen with a smile full of kindness, without the slightest trace of arrogance. As soon as his voice fell, Chu Wuming did not wait for Xiaochen to reply this time. Instead, he looked at the various families present and said with a smile on his face, "Everyone, Brother Xiaochen's strength is clear for all to see. Moreover, the Heavenly Stellar Residence is a new force. It is a blessing for my Moonless Empire to have such a young talent. Today, allow me to be willful for once and take out 30 illusory moon fruits to gift to the Heavenly Stellar Residence to show my Moonless Empire's kindness." What does everyone think? As soon as Chu Wuming said this, the people of the various large families were stunned at first, but they quickly reacted. Right now, no one dared to challenge Xiaochen. Even the four great clans, Jiang, Shen, Han, and Yang, did not dare to send anyone to challenge Xiaochen. Even the Yang clan did not say a word when their own clan member was killed. As such, Chu Wuming's words were clearly meant to protect the reputation of the various clans. After all, Xiaochen's strength was already displayed here. Although it was only one move, it was enough to suppress everyone. If they really fought to the death, perhaps more than 30 of the remaining 60 illusory moon fruits would fall into the pockets of the heavenly stellar residents. It had to be said that Chu Wuming's words seemed normal, but it resolved the awkward situation very well. Not only did it save the reputation of the various large families, but it also made the various large families grateful. After all, Chu Wuming's actions were indeed beneficial to the various large families. Of course, while giving benefits to the various large families, the illusory moon fruits that Xiaochen would receive would be much less. However, how could Chu Wuming not think of this? The illusory moon convention was still being held. As a prince, Chu Wuming naturally could not side with Xiaochen and offend the 18 major families. Just as Chu Wuming finished speaking, Chu Wuming's voice rang in Xiaochen's ears. This was Chu Wuming's soul transmission. No one else could hear it. Brother Xiaochen, please don't be impatient. This is also a way to satisfy both sides. After this palace will compensate Brother Xiaochen. Chu Wuming took the initiative to transmit his voice. Hearing this, Xiaochen nodded slightly. Since Chu Wuming had already done this, Xiaochen naturally had no reason to refuse. Moreover, Chu Wuming had already said that he would compensate after this. Although he did not know what the compensation was, it should not be less than 30 illusory moon fruits. Xiaochen cupped his hands towards Chu Wuming and said, "Then I'll use the heavenly stellar residence to thank His Highness, the third prince." Brother Xiaochen, there's no need to be so polite. Chu Wuming smiled and nodded when he heard Xiaochen's words. Then, Xiaochen took the initiative to walk down the stage and return to the pavilion of the heavenly stellar residence. Seeing that Xiaochen had returned, Gu Xiu said somewhat gloomily, "King Jiao, isn't 30 illusory moon fruits a bit too little?" Clearly, he did not understand why Xiaochen would agree to Chu Wuming's decision. Hearing Gu Xiu's words, Xiaochen smiled faintly. Chu Wuming is the third prince. Since he has already spoken, I will be offending him if I don't agree. Besides, why do you think Chu Wuming made such a decision? Isn't it to appease the various prestigious families present? Think about it. If I were to obtain the last 60 illusory moon fruits, what would the various prestigious families think? Xiaochen purposely paused. Hearing this, Gu Xiu nodded slightly and felt that Xiaochen's words were reasonable. However, he still felt that 30 illusory moon fruits were too little. While Gu Xiu nodded slightly, Xiaochen continued. Besides, Chu Wuming has already secretly transmitted a message to me. He said that this is a win-win situation and that Chu Wuming will compensate me after the illusory moon conference ends. After Xiaochen finished speaking, Gu Xiu immediately revealed a smile. I knew that King Jiao of the Bewitching Sword wouldn't suffer a loss. He flattered Xiaochen without batting an eyelid. Hearing this, Xiaochen only smiled and did not say anything. Just as Gu Xiu finished speaking, Chu Wuming's personal maid walked over with a storage ring and respectfully handed it to Xiaochen. She also conveyed Chu Wuming's words to Xiaochen. Young Master Xiao, here are 30 illusory moon fruits. His Highness the Third Prince has specially ordered me to deliver them. His Highness also wants me to tell young Master Xiao that after the illusory moon conference, young Master Xiao must not be in a hurry to leave. His Highness will definitely give young Master Xiao an explanation for the matter that we previously agreed upon. Seeing Chu Wuming's personal maid handing over 30 illusory moon fruits to Xiaochen, the surrounding large families revealed envious expressions. However, they did not say much. After all, this was the third prince's decision. Moreover, this decision was extremely beneficial to their large families. Otherwise, with Xiao Chen's strength, how many illusory moon fruits he wanted would depend entirely on Xiao Chen. If he was greedy and took all 60 illusory moon fruits, what could the large families say? At most, they would secretly bear a grudge and find an opportunity to take revenge in the future. Not caring about the gazes of the large families, after sending off Chu Wuming's personal maid, Xiao Chen threw the storage ring containing the 30 illusory moon fruits to Gu Xiu beside him and said with a faint smile on his face, "This third prince is rather interesting. It seems that there are still many things that we don't know about the Moonless Empire. The seemingly powerful empire is actually surging with undercurrents." 22nd update. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 361. From the third prince's behavior, Xiao Chen could obviously tell that the third prince wanted to rope him in. As for the reason, it was because the struggle for power was clearly extremely intense in the royal clan. That was why the third prince needed to rope in a group of his own forces. He had already guessed a little, but the reality was far more intense than Xiao Chen had imagined. The Moonless Empire still had not established a crown prince, so the princes had basically reached the point of killing each other. The royal clan was the most heartless. This saying was not false at all. Before great power, even brothers would not show any mercy. He waited patiently in his seat. As the battles progressed, the Heaven Realm cultivators that appeared in the end were clearly much more powerful than before. In particular, the Jiang, Shen, Han, and Yang clans could basically crush the other clans. Among them, the Shen clan Shen Qianfeng, the Jiang clans Jiang Juiying, the Han clans Han Ping, and the Yang clans Yang Fu were the strongest. However, through their battles, Xiao Chen could tell that they were only at the level of peak prodigies. They were still unable to make Xiao Chen take them seriously. The intense battles continued for another day. After 2 days, the Illusionary Moon Conference finally came to an end. Originally, it could have been considered a rather successful Illusionary Moon Conference, but because of Xiao Chen's appearance, the clans were still rather displeased. After all, Xiao Chen had taken away 30 Illusionary Moon fruits by himself. Unknowingly, the gains of the clans had decreased by a lot, especially the Jiang, Shen, Han, and Yang clans. The gains of the Illusionary Moon Conference this time were probably the least the Jiang, Shen, Han, and Yang clans had ever obtained. None of the 4 clans had obtained more than 10 Illusionary Moon fruits. As the Illusionary Moon Conference came to an end, the people of the various clans left one after another. However, when they left, all of them subconsciously glanced at the pavilion where the Heavenly Stellar residents resided. At the same time, the Tao King in the lead spoke softly to the people beside him. Investigate the origins of the Heavenly Stellar residents. After this Illusionary Moon Conference, the Heavenly Stellar residents, a new power, had successfully entered the eyes of the Moonless Empire's large families. Including the Jiang, Shen, Han, and Yang families, all the families had given orders to secretly investigate the Heavenly Stellar residents. They had long expected that the major families would make such a move. This was also the intention of Xiao Chen and the Burning Heaven ruler. Everyone wanted to experience and grow in the Sky River continent. At the very least, they had to integrate into the system of the Sky River continent. In other words, in the Tiana continent, the first thing everyone had to do was to forget their identity as a native of the Tianqian continent and treat themselves as a member of the Tiana continent. This way, they could compete with the native forces of the Tiana continent for various cultivation resources to strengthen themselves. Therefore, Xiao Chen and the Burning Sky ruler had already planned to show off in the Illusionary Moon Conference. Firstly, it was for the Illusionary Moon fruit. Secondly, it was to spread the reputation of the Heavenly Stellar residents. This way, they could quickly gain a foothold in the Moonless Empire. Seeing the people from the various large families leave one after another, Xiao Chen and the others did not get up. Instead, they quietly waited. Not long after the people from the various large families had left the Illusionary Moon Pavilion, the maid who had delivered the storage ring came in front of Xiao Chen again and respectfully said to Xiao Chen, "Young master, please. Hearing the maid's words, Xiaochen nodded slightly, then stood up and walked towards the pavilion. Seeing this, Gu Xiu and the other two originally wanted to follow behind Xiaochen, but the maid stopped them. "Everyone, please wait for a moment. His Highness has only invited young master. You dare to stop us?" Hearing the maid's words, Gu Xiu immediately shouted coldly. Hearing this, Xiaochen waved his hand slightly. "Elder Gu Xiu, please wait here. If there's nothing else, I'll be back soon." Already guessing what Chu Wuming wanted to say to him, Xiaochen did not intend to let Gu Xiu and the other two follow him. Hearing Xiaochen's words, Gu Xiu and the other two fiercely glared at the maid, then cupped their hands and said to Xiaochen, "Then we will wait here for young master. Young master, please be careful." Smiling and nodding at Gu Xiu and the other two, Xiaochen was led by the maid to the central pavilion. The entire pavilion had 2 floors. As soon as Xiaochen entered the pavilion, he saw that Chu Wuming was already waiting here. There was no one else around. In the entire hall of the first floor of the pavilion, only Chu Wuming was there. Even Wu Yun was nowhere to be seen. Seeing Xiaochen walk into the pavilion, Chu Wuming immediately greeted him warmly, as if he had seen an old friend. His hands naturally held Xiaochen's shoulders as he said with a smile, "Ha, brother Xiaochen, I've made you wait for a long time. I have already prepared some wine. Today, I will definitely drink with brother Xiao until we're drunk." Having already prepared the wine for Xiaochen, Chu Wuming looked at the maid at the side and said, "You can leave. Today, I want to speak with brother Xiaochen alone. Without my permission, no one is allowed to enter." "Yes." After hearing Chu Wuming's words, the female servant replied respectfully. Immediately after, she left the pavilion and even closed the main entrance of the pavilion. After ordering the irrelevant people to leave, Chu Wuming personally pulled Xiaochen to the table. There was only a very simple short table. There were 2 praying mats on both sides of the table. From the looks of it, Chu Wuming actually wanted to eat at the same table as Xiaochen. This kind of courtesy was already very high. From this, it could be seen how much importance Chu Wuming attached to Xiaochen. In the face of Chu Wuming's enthusiasm, Xiaochen did not feel the slightest bit nervous. Perhaps in the eyes of others, with Chu Wuming's status, eating at the same table as Xiaochen was absolutely a matter of fear and trepidation. However, for someone of Xiaochen's status, it was not the slightest bit of pressure. Sitting opposite Chu Wuming personally poured wine for Xiaochen. Then, Chu Wuming took the initiative to raise his cup and said, "Brother Xiaochen, today you and I feel like old friends at the first meeting. This is the first cup of wine for you. Your Highness is too polite. Xiaochen is just a wanderer. How could he be worthy of your Highness's kindness?" Hearing Chu Wuming's words, Xiaochen's mouth was polite, but he also raised his wine cup. Then, the two drank at the same time. After drinking this cup, Chu Wuming was overjoyed when he heard Xiaochen's words. Xiaochen was a ranger, which meant that he did not have a sect behind him. A rogue cultivator without a sect was naturally more convenient to rope in. Xiaochen's identity made Chu Wuming overjoyed. Then, he no longer beat around the bush. Since Xiaochen was just a rogue cultivator, there were many things that he could say directly. Putting down the wine cup, the look on Chu Wuming's face gradually became serious. Looking at Xiaochen, Chu Wuming said with sincerity, "Brother Xiaochen, to be honest, in fact, this king is now in need of people. If I can get brother Xiaochen's help, this king can be said to be like a tiger that has grown wings." 23rd update, please collect, please recommend. Chapter 362. Hearing Chu Wuming's words, Xiaochen knew that Chu Wuming was trying to rope him in. Xiaochen secretly smiled, but there was no change on his face. Xiaochen cupped his hands and bowed to Chu Wuming, and then said lightly, "Your Highness really thinks too highly of me. I'm just a small warrior in the celestial realm. How can I help your Highness achieve great things?" Xiaochen didn't agree, but he also didn't refuse decisively. He still wanted to get some information from Chu Wuming. Sure enough, after hearing Xiao Chen's words, Chu Wuming said that he and his two brothers were competing for the position of crown prince. Looking at Xiao Chen, Chu Wuming sighed softly and said, "Brother Xiao Chen, you must be joking. With Brother Xiao Chen's strength, it's hard to find a match among your peers. If I can get Brother Xiao Chen's help, I don't have to worry about not being able to achieve great things. I won't hide it from Brother Xiao Chen. Since Father ascended the throne, he has never appointed a crown prince. Now, all the princes have been competing for the position of crown prince since the beginning. Only my two brothers and I have the ability to continue competing. It can be said that the position of crown prince can only be born between me and my two brothers. Moreover, because of the competition for the position of crown prince, the relationship between us three brothers has become more and more tense. Now, it's almost to the point where we won't rest until one of us dies. Therefore, not only me, but also my two brothers are wantonly trying to rope in various forces in the empire. Beside my two brothers, I don't know what method they use to rope in two core disciples of the windless sacred sect. The two should be about the same age as Brother Xiao Chen. Their cultivation is also at the great circle of the celestial realm. However, their combat strength is extremely terrifying. I have personally seen them kill two Dao-querying realm warriors in succession. And beside me, no one in the same realm and the same age as their opponent. In this way, Brother Xiao Chen should understand what I mean, right? Chu Wuming didn't hide anything. At the same time, the meaning of his words was very clear. The ultimate purpose of recruiting Xiao Chen was to use him to contend with the two core disciples of the windless sacred sect. Although he didn't know whether Xiao Chen could compete with the two core disciples of the sacred sect, in the current situation, Chu Wuming didn't have much choice and could only give it a try. Hearing Chu Wuming's words, Xiao Chen nodded slightly and took a sip of the fine wine in his cup. After a moment of silence, he opened his mouth to speak. "Xiao Chen doesn't deserve your highness's favor. Allow Xiao Chen to ask, how is your highness's power compared to your two brothers?" The only ones who still had a chance to compete for the position of crown prince were Chu Wuming and his two brothers. At this time, after hearing Xiao Chen's words, Chu Wuming was stunned at first, but then he shook his head and smiled bitterly. Xiao Chen's words were actually to better understand the situation of the Moonless Empire. However, in Chu Wuming's ears, Xiao Chen wanted to ask him where his confidence came from. At the same time, he also wanted to see if he had any hope of winning compared to his two brothers. After all, if Xiao Chen chose to help Chu Wuming, then Xiao Chen would be in the same boat as Chu Wuming. If Chu Wuming lost in the end, Xiao Chen's fate could be imagined. He misunderstood Xiao Chen's meaning. Of course, this was also the purpose Xiao Chen wanted to achieve. With a bitter smile, Chu Wuming was silent for a while and finally decided to tell the truth. Although Chu Wuming could deceive Xiao Chen now, this kind of deception couldn't last long, so Chu Wuming chose to tell the truth. As he gazed at Xiao Chen, Chu Wuming spoke with a bitter expression. "To tell you the truth, compared to my two brothers, I'm already at the end of my road. If a turn of events doesn't appear, then I'm afraid I'll have to withdraw from the competition for the position of crown prince." Chu Wuming spoke truthfully about his current situation. Presently, he was already at the end of his road, and these words weren't false at all, nor did he have the slightest intention of exaggerating. Compared to his two brothers, the two core disciples of Tianfeng Xingzong were a great weakness of Chu Wuming, but it wasn't the most crucial gap. Compared to his two brothers, Chu Wuming was the most passive, and that was when it came to almighty figures at the Dao Emperor realm. Yes, almighty figures at the Dao Emperor realm. Presently, there were a total of 2 almighty figures at the Dao Emperor realm in the entire Moonless Empire, and both of them were from the imperial family. Presently, Chu Wuming's 2 older brothers had each obtained the support of a Dao Emperor realm expert, and only Chu Wuming didn't have the support of a Dao Emperor realm expert. In this way, Chu Wuming, who didn't have the support of a Dao Emperor realm expert, could clearly be considered to have failed. Because many powers didn't dare side with Chu Wuming, and the reason was very simple. It was because Chu Wuming didn't have the support of a Dao Emperor realm expert. It was obviously impossible for a prince that didn't have the support of a Dao Emperor realm expert to become eminent in the competition for the position of crown prince, and the various powers would naturally not be stupid enough to side with a prince that didn't have the slightest chance of winning. It could be said that since Chu Wuming's two older brothers successively obtained the support of the two Dao Emperor realm experts of the imperial family, their forces grew stronger and stronger by the day. On the other hand, Chu Wuming's forces grew weaker and weaker by the day, and it was even to the extent that many powers that had sided with Chu Wuming had started to leave successively and side with Chu Wuming's two older brothers. The situation was very bad, and it was even to the extent that it could be said that Chu Wuming had already failed. Presently, he was only struggling at death's door. It was impossible for him to go against his two older brothers because so long as Chu Wuming didn't have the support of a Dao Emperor realm expert behind him, then it was impossible for Chu Wuming to have the confidence to go against his two older brothers. On the other hand, even though the entire Moonless Empire had an enormous population and a vast territory, where could one find a Dao Emperor realm expert? It was utterly impossible to find one. Chu Wuming truthfully told Xiaochen about his current situation. In the end, he said in an extremely sincere manner, "To tell you the truth, brother Xiaochen, I'm in an extremely dangerous situation now, and it can even be said that I'm in a hopeless situation. However, I still hope that brother Xiaochen can lend me a hand. Even though my two older brothers have the support of a Dao Emperor realm expert behind them, they're both ancestors of the imperial family, so they won't personally make a move against me. They're mostly just a form of deterrence. If brother Xiaochen is able to assist me, then I'll still have a chance to fight my two older brothers." When he heard Chu Wuming, Xiaochen fell silent and didn't answer him. He was naturally not silent because of Chu Wuming's situation, and he was silent because of the situation in the Moonless Empire. I never expected that the Moonless Empire's imperial family would actually have two Dao Emperor realm experts. Fortunately, I didn't become enemies with the imperial family, otherwise, just the Heaven Scorcher ruler alone would be insufficient to go against the imperial family of the Moonless Empire. After he obtained some secret information about the imperial family of the Moonless Empire from Chu Wuming and confirmed the number of Dao Emperor realm experts in the imperial family, Xiaochen fell silent for a short while before a bold plan quickly arose in his heart. He gazed at Chu Wuming because if this plan was to be carried out, then Chu Wuming couldn't be left unattended. Moreover, Chu Wuming was extremely crucial. 24th update. Please add it to your collection. Please recommend it. Chapter 363. After learning about the situation of the Moonless Empire from Chu Wuming, as well as many secrets of the imperial family, Xiaochen was silent for a while. He already had a plan in his heart, but he still needed to discuss it with the Burning Sky ruler. Therefore, after a while, Xiaochen looked at Chu Wuming, his expression also very sincere. "Xiaochen thanks your highness for your kindness, and I am grateful to the point of tears. To be honest, Xiaochen and my uncle have depended on each other for survival since childhood. Along the way, we have also met many people of the same path. Everyone has been traveling the 4 seas. After so many years, my uncle is also quite tired, so this time, we have settled down in Moontrace City. We plan to live here in seclusion and live a carefree life. Originally, your highness loved Xiaochen so much, so Xiaochen should not refuse. However, this matter is too important. I hope your highness can give Xiaochen some time to return and discuss it with my uncle." Without batting an eyelid, he told Chu Wuming about the situation of the Heavenly Stellar Residence. From Xiaochen's words, the Heavenly Stellar Residence was formed by a group of wandering cultivators. Originally, Chu Wuming was very interested in the Heavenly Stellar Residence. Now, after hearing Xiaochen's words, he understood. No wonder he had never heard of the Heavenly Stellar Residence before. It was formed by a group of wandering cultivators from other places. On the Tiana continent, there were many wandering cultivators, and among them, there were many who considered the 4 seas their home. Thus, the sudden appearance of the Heavenly Stellar Residence was not surprising. Smiling slightly at Xiaochen, Chu Wuming said, "Brother Xiaochen is right. I have been rude. Tomorrow, I will personally go to the Heavenly Stellar Residence. Tonight, brother Xiaochen can discuss it with my uncle in advance." Many thanks, Your Highness. Hearing Chu Wuming's words, Xiaochen smiled and said, All right, let's not talk about these troublesome matters. Today is the first time I have met Brother Xiaochen. You and I must get drunk. Chu Wuming stopped talking about these things and took the initiative to change the topic. He raised the wine cup in his hand and drank with Xiaochen. While Xiaochen and Chu Wuming were drinking to their heart's content, Wu Yun and Wu De were sitting opposite each other in a pavilion within the illusory moon pavilion. Looking at her brother, Wu Yun's expression was extremely ugly. Under her interrogation, Wu De had finally told the truth. She already knew how Wu De became enemies with Xiaochen. Xiaochen didn't bully people at all. On the contrary, Wu De's actions were worse than pigs and dogs. With a slap, Wu Yun ruthlessly slapped Wu De's face. This was the first time Wu Yun had slapped Wu De since they were young. Her eyes were filled with anger as she coldly shouted, You are simply a beast. It seems that in the years that I wasn't at home, you have become lawless. Hearing Wu Yun's angry scolding, Wu De didn't dare to retort. He could tell that his sister was really angry. At the same time, Xiaochen and the third prince, Chu Wuming, were having a long talk in the pavilion. Wu De also realized that the situation was developing in a direction that he didn't dare to imagine. From Wu Yun's words, Wu De already knew how important Chu Wuming was to Xiaochen. If Chu Wuming wanted to, let alone himself, the entire Wu family would suffer. Using the entire Wu family to curry favor with Xiaochen was definitely impossible for others. However, for Chu Wuming, it was just a matter of a few words. If Chu Wuming really thought that Xiaochen was his good steed, then he really might do such a thing. Using the entire Wu family to curry favor with Xiaochen. Lowering his head, Wu De didn't dare to look at his sister. After a round of angry scolding, Wu Yun gradually calmed down. She helplessly sighed and said, I'm afraid that even your sister won't be able to save you. Hearing Wu Yun's words, Wu De immediately panicked. If even his sister couldn't do anything, then wouldn't he be dead for sure? Hurriedly crawling in front of Wu Yun, Wu De's face was filled with grief as he cried and begged. Seeing this, Wu Yun bitterly said, Sigh, now that things have come to this, whether or not I can live now depends on your highness and Xiaochen. Your sister can only do her best. However, even if I can keep my life in the end, it will definitely be difficult for me to escape punishment. Prepare yourself. Wu Yun didn't have too much confidence. However, she couldn't just watch as Wu De was killed. After all, he was her only brother. Right now, everything could only depend on Chu Wuming and Xiaochen. It was unknown what Wu Yun and Wu De were talking about. They chatted with Chu Wuming until night fell. Only then did Xiaochen walk out of the loft accompanied by Chu Wuming. However, just as Xiaochen and Wu De walked out of the loft, they immediately saw Wu Yun and Wu De kneeling outside the door. Seeing Chu Wuming and Xiaochen, the maid from before hurriedly said, Your Highness, Miss Wu has been kneeling here since 2 hours ago. This subordinate asked Miss Wu why she was kneeling here, but Miss Wu didn't say anything. She only said that she was waiting for Xiaochen. Hearing that Wu Yun was waiting for Xiaochen here, Chu Wuming immediately understood Wu Yun's intentions. He didn't say anything and looked at Xiaochen. Since Chu Wuming knew Wu Yun's intentions, Xiaochen naturally knew as well. He looked at Wu De with a trace of mockery in his eyes and said, Isn't this the Wu family's eldest young master, Wu De? What? Why are you kneeling here? Young Master Xiaochen, I already know what Wu De has done. I've specially brought him here to ask for forgiveness from Xiaochen. These years, because my daughter wasn't in Moon Trace City, Wu De's actions have indeed caused the wrath of the heavens and the resentment of the people. Today, Wu De's life is entirely up to young Master Xiaochen. Hearing Xiaochen's words, Wu De didn't reply. Instead, it was Wu Yun who spoke. She had specially brought Wu De here to ask for forgiveness. Moreover, whether he was to be killed or tortured, it was entirely up to Xiaochen to decide. Smiling slightly, Xiaochen couldn't help but take a few more glances at Wu Yun. This woman's appearance wasn't bad. Although she couldn't be compared to Qin Shuru and Fairy of 100 Flowers, she could still be considered a beauty. Moreover, compared to her beauty, Wu Yun's intelligence wasn't the slightest bit inferior. She had advanced in order to retreat and brought Wu De here for him to decide. Very smart. This was indeed the only way to save Wu De. Otherwise, as long as Xiaochen wanted to, Wu De would definitely die. Moreover, he didn't even need to do it himself. As Chu Wuming's woman, Wu Yun was currently kneeling in front of Xiaochen. Regarding this, Xiaochen naturally wouldn't make things too ugly. After having the servant girl by the side help Wu Yun up, Xiaochen indifferently said, "Miss Wu Yun's words are true. Wu De's life is entirely up to me to decide." Hearing Xiaochen's words, Wu Yun was stunned at first. However, she quickly gritted her teeth and replied, "It's all up to young master." Facing Xiaochen, Wu Yun could feel a great pressure. This pressure was even greater than that of Chu Wuming. She completely didn't know what Xiaochen was thinking. She was afraid that Xiaochen would really give the order to kill Wu De. Although she was worried in her heart, Xiaochen quickly gave an answer. He looked at Wu De and calmly said, "Actually, I don't care about your life or death. However, since Miss Wu is kneeling on the ground for you, then I will give you a chance. Apologize to all the people you have persecuted over the years and give them sufficient compensation. In addition, you must obtain their forgiveness. Remember, all the people you have persecuted must forgive you. As long as there's one person who doesn't forgive you, then you can kill yourself." 25th update, please bookmark, please recommend. Chapter 364. Xiaochen said calmly. Wu De seemed to be scared silly and did not reply for a long time. Seeing this, Chu Wuming shouted coldly, "Did you not hear what Brother Xiaochen said?" Being shouted at by Chu Wuming, Wu De hurriedly nodded and replied, "Yes, I understand." He did not expect that Chu Wuming would favor Xiaochen so much. At this moment, Wu De did not have any desire for revenge and replied with fear. Seeing this, Xiaochen did not say anything and turned to Chu Wuming and cupped his hands. "Your Highness, please go back. I am indebted to your Highness for your kindness today." Xiaochen is in fear and trepidation. "It is already late, I will not disturb your Highness any longer. Brother Xiaochen, please take care. I have already ordered someone to prepare a carriage to send Brother Xiao back to the city. I will not see you off." Chu Wuming replied. "Thank you, your Highness." After bidding farewell to Chu Wuming, Xiaochen left the illusory moon pavilion with Gu Xiu and the other two. They sat in the carriage that Chu Wuming had prepared for them and headed towards Moon Trace City. He was not worried that Wu De would deceive him. As long as Wu Yun was there, Wu De would definitely not dare to lie. This was a smart woman. She knew that this was the only chance that Xiaochen gave Wu De to survive. Therefore, not only Wu De, but Wu Yun would also personally visit those who had been hurt by Wu De and try her best to seek their forgiveness. At the same time, she would also give them generous compensation. Whether or not he killed Wu De did not affect Xiaochen in the slightest. He was not afraid that Wu De would seek revenge in the future. Not to mention whether he had the ability. Just by looking at Wu De's appearance just now, he knew that Wu De no longer had the courage to take revenge on him. After Xiaochen left, Wu De left the illusory moon pavilion alone. At the same time, standing on the roof of the pavilion, Chu Wuming looked at the stars in the sky. Beside him, Wu Yun said softly, "What does your Highness think of Xiaochen? Is it the good horse that your Highness has been looking for?" Even though I haven't had much contact with him, I'm able to discern that Xiaochen isn't an ordinary person. If I'm able to obtain his assistance, then perhaps I'll be able to hold on for a period of time and search for other methods to get out of this situation. However, this only treats the symptoms and not the root of the problem. Without the support of a Dao Emperor realm expert, I'll always be inferior to my two brothers. Alas, as he finished speaking, Chu Wuming sighed lightly. An expert at the Dao Emperor realm was like a thorn that was deeply embedded in Chu Wuming's heart. Without an expert at the Dao Emperor realm, everything was just an illusion. His eyes carried a wisp of helplessness and unwillingness. When she saw this, the nearby Wu Yun consoled. "Your Highness, there's no need for that. With your Highness' great ability and strategy, I firmly believe that your Highness will be able to ascend the position of Crown Prince even if you don't have the support of a Dao Emperor realm expert. You don't understand. Without the support of a Dao Emperor realm expert, everything I do is like a pavilion in the sky, and it might collapse at any moment. Never mind, let's not talk about this. I'll be heading to the Heavenly Stellar Residence tomorrow, and I might be staying in Moontree City for a few more days. During these few days, quickly bring your younger brother along and complete Brother Xiao Chen's request. Otherwise, if Brother Xiao Chen wants to kill your younger brother, then I won't stop him. Do you understand? Obviously, Chu Wuming wasn't willing to continue thinking about these annoying matters, so he changed the topic. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and walked into the pavilion. As she gazed at Chu Wuming's figure, Wuyan bowed respectfully and said, "Don't worry, Your Highness. I know what to do." Chu Wuming had already decided to head to the Heavenly Stellar Residence tomorrow. At the same time, Xiao Chen and the others had returned safely to Moontree City. When they arrived outside the Heavenly Stellar Residence, Xiao Chen's group of 4 got off the carriage and walked into the Heavenly Stellar Residence. As they walked, Gu Xiu asked in a low voice from the side, "Young master, what sort of compensation did Chu Wuming give you?" Earlier, they were on Chu Wuming's carriage, and the driver of the carriage was one of Chu Wuming's men, so Gu Xiu couldn't ask about it. At this moment, there were no outsiders, so Gu Xiu naturally couldn't help but ask curiously. Hearing Gu Xiu's words, Xiao Chen faintly smiled and said, "You don't say, this Chu Wuming is indeed not bad. He did give me some good stuff, and its value is completely comparable to 30 illusionary moon fruits." In the previous conversation, Chu Wuming gave Xiao Chen a storage ring. Within the storage ring, there were many medicinal pills and talismans. Moreover, many of these talismans and medicinal pills were things that had never been seen before in the Heavenly Stellar Continent. Furthermore, their ranks weren't low either, all of them reaching the heaven rank. Among them, the talismans were practically all used to save one's life. There were defensive talismans, speed talismans, and medicinal pills that were beneficial to cultivation. It could be said that the value of this storage ring was absolutely not low. From this, it was enough to see that Chu Wuming intended to recruit Xiao Chen. Only after hearing Xiao Chen's reply did Gu Xiu smile in satisfaction. Just like this trip to the illusionary moon gathering could be considered as not a wasted trip. Along the way to the front yard of the Heavenly Stellar Residence, Xiao Chen said to Gu Xiu and the other 2, "I'm going to see Uncle Tian. There's something that I need to discuss. The 3 of you should also rest." There were still things that he needed to discuss with the Burning Sky Ruler. Hearing these words, Gu Xiu and the other 2 consciously nodded their heads and replied. Immediately after, Xiao Chen came to the main yard by himself. He gently knocked on the door of the Burning Sky Ruler's room. Very quickly, the Burning Sky Ruler's voice sounded from within the room. "Chener, right? Come in." Hearing these words, Xiao Chen pushed the door and entered. He sat down in the room and first gave a simple explanation of the illusionary moon gathering to the Burning Sky Ruler. After which, he handed the 2 storage rings over to the Burning Sky Ruler. After receiving the 2 storage rings from Xiao Chen, the Burning Sky Ruler said with a smile, "You're saying that the 3rd Prince of the Moonless Empire wants to recruit you to help him fight for the position of Crown Prince?" "That's right," Xiao Chen said. "You can't agree to this. We haven't gained a firm foothold in the Heavenly Qin continent yet. It's not wise to rashly get involved in the struggle for power in the imperial family. Reject him tomorrow." The Burning Sky Ruler didn't hesitate to reject Chu Wuming's recruitment. However, after hearing his words, Xiao Chen had a different opinion. "Uncle Tian, don't be in a hurry to reject him. Indeed, we've just arrived in the Heavenly River continent and haven't gained a firm foothold in the Heavenly River continent yet. However, I think that helping Chu Wuming will bring us great benefits." "Benefits? Chener, do you know that if we help the 3rd Prince, we'll be getting involved in the struggle for power in the imperial family? Even if there will be benefits, it will also be accompanied by great danger. Moreover, with me here, why should we be afraid of the Moonless Empire's imperial family? The Burning Sky ruler didn't know that the Moonless Empire's imperial family had two almighty Tao emperors. Perhaps from the Burning Sky ruler's point of view, the Moonless Empire's imperial family only had one almighty Tao emperor. As such, with his strength, he naturally didn't need to fear the imperial family, the Chu family. Hearing the Burning Sky ruler's words, Xiaochen moved his mouth close to the Burning Sky ruler's ear and said softly, "Uncle Tian, I feel that we shouldn't be enemies with the imperial family. At the very least, we shouldn't directly start a war. Today, from Chu Wuming, I've already found out that the Moonless Empire's imperial family has two almighty Tao emperors." 26th update. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 365. He told the Burning Heaven ruler about the two almighty Tao emperors in the imperial family. When he heard this, the Burning Heaven ruler was first stunned, then he looked at Xiaochen with a serious expression and said, "Are you sure that the third prince didn't lie to you?" "I'm sure, because he has no reason to lie to me. Moreover, Chu Wuming's current situation is extremely dangerous. If we can lend him a hand at this time, not only will we be able to gain a foothold in the Moonless Empire, we can even develop our forces into the imperial capital. Uncle Tian, Moontrace City is only a small city in the end. Even though it has a unique treasure like the illusory moon fruit, it is still lacking in cultivation resources. However, the imperial capital is different. As the capital of an empire, close to 80% of the cultivation resources in the entire Moonless Empire are concentrated in the imperial capital. If we can head to the imperial capital, wouldn't we be able to achieve twice the results with half the effort in our cultivation?" He told the Burning Heaven ruler about Chu Wuming's current situation, and at the same time, he told him about his plan. According to Xiaochen's thoughts, Chu Wuming was already at the edge of a cliff, and there was no way out. The reason for all this was because Chu Wuming didn't have the support of a Tao Emperor Realm Almighty behind him. Thus, the Burning Heaven ruler naturally became the life-saving straw that Chu Wuming had been looking for all this time. Just think about it, if Chu Wuming discovered the existence of the Burning Heaven ruler, what would he do? Without a doubt, Chu Wuming would definitely spare no effort to rope in the Heavenly Stellar residence. At the same time, he would personally introduce the Burning Heaven ruler to the imperial family of the Moonless Empire. In this way, with Chu Wuming's introduction, it was logical that the Burning Heaven ruler wanted to gain a foothold in the imperial family. Moreover, if Chu Wuming brought the Burning Heaven ruler into the imperial capital, it wouldn't cause the imperial family to be too wary. After all, this was a Tao Emperor Realm Almighty that Chu Wuming found. Not only would they not offend the imperial family, but they would also allow the Burning Heaven ruler to obtain a place in the imperial family. With this, everyone would naturally be able to openly enter the imperial capital. On one hand, they would be able to pull the third Prince Chu Wuming's banner. On the other hand, they would be able to quickly establish themselves in the Moonless Empire. Just as Xiaochen had always thought, everyone came to the Sky River continent not to take refuge, nor to fight, but to seek a way to progress. And if they wanted to progress and make breakthroughs, resources were obviously indispensable. If one wanted to obtain enough cultivation resources on the land of the Sky River continent, it was essential to integrate into the Sky River continent. If one couldn't integrate into the system of the Sky River continent, how could one compete with the native forces of the Sky River continent for cultivation resources? Because of this, when he heard that Chu Wuming wanted to recruit him, Xiaochen had this plan in his heart. That was to use Chu Wuming to quickly establish a foothold in the Moonless Empire. In this way, no matter if they wanted to continue staying in the Moonless Empire in the future or develop in other places, there would be benefits and no harm. It could be said that the Moonless Empire was a springboard for everyone to integrate into the Heavenly Chen continent, and Chu Wuming was the best opportunity right now. If Xiaochen and the others could help Chu Wuming ascend to the position of Crown Prince, then the Moonless Empire would become the safest haven for everyone in the Heavenly Chen continent. Xiaochen even thought of sending his parents to the Moonless Empire in the future, so that he could be at ease. Of course, bringing his parents to the Moonless Empire was a matter for another time, because the premise was that he had to help Chu Wuming obtain the position of Crown Prince. Otherwise, everything would be empty talk. Secondly, he had to find the whereabouts of his parents. Not only could he not become enemies with the imperial family, but he could also integrate into the entire Moonless Empire, allowing everyone to openly become a powerful force of the Moonless Empire. He could openly walk in the Moonless Empire and compete with the other native forces for cultivation resources. This was Xiao Chen's ultimate goal. It could be said that this plan of Xiao Chen's was beneficial to both himself and Chu Wuming. Therefore, there was no need to consider whether Chu Wuming would reject it or not, because he had no reason to reject it at all, let alone suspect anything. As for the Burning Heaven ruler, he only needed to tell Chu Wuming that he was a Tao Emperor Realm Almighty who wandered the world, and there wouldn't be any doubts at all. Compared to becoming enemies with the imperial family that had two Tao Emperor Realm Almighty experts, this choice was undoubtedly the most perfect. After all, if they didn't borrow the name of Chu Wuming, there would probably be quite a bit of resistance if they wanted to develop from Moontrace City to the imperial capital. At the same time, it would be very easy to arouse the vigilance of the imperial family. After all, the sudden appearance of an unfamiliar Tao Emperor Realm Almighty expert in the Moonless Empire was obviously a major matter, and once the imperial family felt that Xiao Chen and the others were a threat, they would definitely make a move to encircle and annihilate Xiao Chen and the others. At that time, even if the Burning Heaven ruler was present, the imperial family still had two Tao Emperor Realm Almighty experts. Once the imperial family made a move, the outcome of everyone was obvious. Even if they weren't completely annihilated, they would definitely suffer heavy casualties. In this way, it would obviously go against their original intention of coming to the Sky River continent. After listening to Xiao Chen's plan, the Burning Heaven ruler exhorted for a moment, and after a long while, he said to Xiao Chen, "Chen, your idea is indeed good, but have you ever thought about what we'll do if Chu Wuming fails in the end? As a member of Chu Wuming, if he fails, the other two princes won't let us off easily. Uncle Tian, since ancient times, riches and honor are sought from danger. Since we want to smoothly enter the imperial capital and openly become a tyrant in the imperial capital, how can we not bear some risks? Compared to the risks, our gains are obviously greater, right?" Xiao Chen replied when he heard the Burning Heaven ruler's words. Riches and honor are sought from danger. If you want to obtain benefits, you naturally have to bear risks. This was certain. Where in the world would such a good thing exist if you were unwilling to bear risks and wanted to obtain benefits? Following Xiao Chen's words, the Burning Heaven ruler nodded slightly, and then he finally nodded and agreed. "All right, we'll do as Chen says." In the end, he agreed with Xiao Chen's plan. Xiao Chen smiled when he heard that. Obviously, he'd expected the Burning Heaven ruler's answer. In the end, Xiao Chen spoke once more. "Since Uncle Tian has agreed, then we'll need Uncle Tian to put on a show when Chu Wuming personally comes tomorrow. All right, tell me, what should I do tomorrow?" "It's very simple. Let Chu Wuming witness our strength with his own eyes. When he comes tomorrow, not only do we not have to hide anything, we have to intentionally display our strength. In addition, when Chu Wuming comes tomorrow, there'll definitely be experts protecting him. Although Chu Wuming is unable to see through Uncle Tian's cultivation with his current cultivation, Uncle Tian can slightly emanate your aura and let the people by his side sense that Uncle Tian is an almighty Tao Emperor. In this way, Chu Wuming will naturally take the initiative to come look for us," said Xiao Chen. 27th update, please bookmark, please recommend. Chapter 366. After discussing the details of tomorrow's plan with the Burning Heaven ruler, the Burning Heaven ruler even called over Zhang Qi and Sikong Ming, the two Dao sovereigns, for the four of them to discuss together. After confirming the plan of using Chu Wuming to enter the imperial city, after a night of discussion, they decided on what to do after Chu Wuming personally paid them a visit. After finalizing all the details, the sky was already bright. Xiao Chen and the other three did not sleep for the entire night. Of course, with their cultivation, not sleeping for a night did not affect them at all. Everyone was still very energetic. All right, remember Chinner's words. If Chu Wuming comes today, do as we have discussed. Looking at Xiao Chen and the other two, the Burning Heaven ruler said in a deep voice. Yes. After a respectful response, Xiao Chen and the other two walked away. After returning to his room and washing up, Xiao Chen began to cultivate, silently waiting for Chu Wuming's arrival. Yesterday at the Illusory Moon Pavilion, they had already said that they would personally pay a visit. At noon, from the Illusory Moon Pavilion, a luxurious carriage specially used by the imperial family slowly came out, heading towards Moontrace City. This carriage was extremely graceful and luxurious. It was entirely golden, and at the top of the carriage, there were 4 lifelike flood dragons roaring towards the sky. At the same time, the horses pulling this carriage were not ordinary horses, but 4 dragon horses with black scales all over their bodies and legs. Dragon horses were demonic beasts with an interesting dragon bloodline. These 4 batches of dragon horses were all reared by the imperial family, and were extremely precious. They could be considered as the symbol of the imperial family. To be able to use such a carriage, there was no need to guess the identity of the person inside. It was definitely the 3rd prince, Chu Wuming, without a doubt. At this moment, the 3rd prince, Chu Wuming, was sitting at the head of the carriage. For such a large carriage, it would not be crowded even if 20 or 30 people sat inside. On the 2 sides of Chu Wuming's seat were Wu Yun and a white-haired old man. This old man did not appear yesterday, but the 3rd prince's attitude towards him was extremely peaceful. In fact, this was normal. The old man's name was Du Chengfeng, and he was the person the 3rd prince relied on the most. He was a super expert of the Dao Sovereign Realm. As the 3rd prince's personal expert, Du Chengfeng had saved the 3rd prince's life several times. Therefore, whenever the 3rd prince went out, he would always bring Du Chengfeng with him. After all, the battle for the position of crown prince had reached a point where there was no one else. Chu Wuming's 2 elder brothers were not incapable of assassinating others. Therefore, Chu Wuming obviously placed great importance on his own safety. Of course, his 2 elder brothers were the same. If given the chance, Chu Wuming would also mercilessly exterminate his 2 elder brothers. Chu Wuming was naturally heading towards the Heavenly Stellar Residence as they hurried towards Moontrace City. On the way, Chu Wuming looked at Du Chengfeng, whose eyes were slightly closed, and said in a peaceful tone, "Elder Du doesn't seem to be too interested in the Heavenly Stellar Residence. Your Highness must be joking. Since there is such a young demonic existence in the Heavenly Stellar Residence that your Highness is so concerned about, it should also have some foundation. However, this old man's thoughts are not as thorough as your Highness. In this old man's heart, I only want to protect your Highness' safety. As for the rest, this old man naturally does not care too much." Du Chengfeng replied indifferently after hearing Chu Wuming's words. Hearing Du Chengfeng's words, Chu Wuming smiled and said, "Elder Du is right. If not for Elder Du by my side, how could I still exist in this world today? I have always relied on Elder Du in your Highness's eyes. This old man has already pledged his allegiance to your Highness. Naturally, I would be willing to sacrifice my life for your Highness," Du Chengfeng said. The 2 of them chatted casually for a while. As they chatted, the carriage entered Moontrace City. They did not follow Chu Wuming to the Heavenly Stellar Residence. Instead, Wu Yan returned to the Wu clan alone. It was obvious that she wanted to bring Wu De to visit those families that he had once persecuted. Seeing Wu Yan leave, before parting, Chu Wuming reminded her, "Remember, you must complete this matter properly. Do not hide anything. Otherwise, Wu De will definitely lose his head. This servant does not dare to hide anything. Please rest assured, your Highness." Hearing Chu Wuming's words, Wu Yan respectfully bowed and replied. After sending Wu Yan off, Chu Wuming and Du Chengfeng arrived at the Heavenly Stellar Residence. When they alighted from the carriage outside of the Heavenly Stellar Residence, Du Chengfeng was always by Chu Wuming's side. Seeing Chu Wuming appear, one of the two Dao Transformation Realm cultivators guarding outside the Heavenly Stellar Residence immediately stepped forward and asked, "Who are you?" Sensing the two Dao Transformation Realm cultivators guarding the door, Du Chengfeng, who was behind Chu Wuming, had a strange look in his eyes. He inwardly thought, this Heavenly Stellar Residence is really generous. They actually used two Dao Transformation Realm cultivators to guard the door. He was somewhat surprised by the strength displayed by this Heavenly Stellar Residence. However, Du Chengfeng clearly did not know that these two guards were deliberately arranged. Normally, the Heavenly Stellar Residence would naturally not use Dao Transformation Realm cultivators to guard the door. In response to the Dao Transformation Realm cultivator's question, one of the Imperial Guards who came with Chu Wuming immediately shouted coldly, "Impudent! How dare you be disrespectful to His Highness, the Third Prince, who has come to visit?" "So it's His Highness, the Third Prince. The young master has already instructed for your highness to wait here for a moment. This servant will go inform the young master." After knowing Chu Wuming's identity, this person also cupped his hands and bowed. Then, he turned around and ran into the courtyard. Even though he already knew Chu Wuming's identity, this person actually directly left Chu Wuming hanging here and did not invite Chu Wuming in. Seeing this, the Imperial Guards who followed Chu Wuming burned with anger. Even Chu Wuming was secretly dissatisfied. It was true that he valued Xiaochen, but it was not to the extent that he would kneel down and beg. However, Xiaochen's hospitality today was indeed a little too much for Chu Wuming's face. Chu Wuming was secretly dissatisfied. However, to his surprise, Du Chengfeng took the initiative to speak up at this moment. "Your Highness, please don't be angry. This Heavenly Stellar Residence is very mysterious. The two guards at the door are both at the Dao Transformation Realm. I'm afraid this Heavenly Stellar Residence is not simple to use people at the Dao Transformation Realm to guard the door." Hearing Du Chengfeng's words, Chu Wuming's face slightly changed. A strange light flashed in his eyes, but he forcefully suppressed the dissatisfaction in his heart. After waiting outside for about 100 breaths of time, Chu Wuming saw Xiaochen hastily walking in from the courtyard. Beside him was a middle-aged man, and this middle-aged man was actually Zhang Qi. Quickly walking in front of Chu Wuming, Xiaochen said with an apologetic face, "Your Highness, please forgive me for not coming out to greet you. Xiaochen has committed a capital offense." While apologizing to Chu Wuming, Xiaochen shouted coldly at the two Dao Transformation Realm warriors behind him. "How can the two of you neglect His Highness the Third Prince? This is a capital offense. Men, take these two ignorant people away. Cripple their cultivation and expel them from the Heavenly Stellar Residence." First, he apologized to Chu Wuming. Then, he directly wanted to cripple the cultivation of these two Dao Transformation Realm warriors. Hearing Xiaochen's words, Chu Wuming was immediately stunned. What's going on? Xiaochen actually crippled Dao Transformation Realm warriors just like that? Isn't this too extravagant? 28th update, please bookmark, please recommend. Chapter 367. From the moment Xiaochen appeared to the moment he gave the order to cripple the cultivation of the two Dao Transformation Realm warriors, Xiaochen did not give Chu Wuming the slightest chance to interrupt. Of course, all of this was planned by Xiaochen and the others in advance. Moreover, the two Dao Transformation Realm warriors also knew about it in advance. At this moment, they were just putting on a show for Chu Wuming. Hearing Xiaochen's words, Zhang Qi behind him respectfully replied, "Yes." Zhang Qi was about to make a move when Chu Wuming grabbed Xiaochen's arm and said with a kind smile, "Brother Xiaochen, please don't be angry. It's not their fault." Chu Wuming pleaded, but Xiaochen said angrily, "The two of them have neglected your highness. If we don't teach them a lesson today, how can we let it go? Brother Xiaochen, let's forget about this matter for this prince's sake. How about it?" Chu Wuming said when he saw that Xiaochen was still unwilling to let it go. Since Chu Wuming had spoken, Xiaochen could only smile bitterly and say, "Since your highness has said so, then forget it. The two of you should quickly thank your highness." "Thank you, Your Highness." Following Xiao Chen's words, the two Dao Transformation Realm cultivators hurriedly bowed and thanked Chu Wuming respectfully. The farce outside Tianqian residence came to an end. Then, under Xiao Chen's lead, Chu Wuming and Du Qingfeng walked into Tianqian residence. As for the accompanying imperial guards, they remained where they were. After following Xiao Chen into Wucheng residence, Xiao Chen and Chu Wuming walked side by side in the front. Du Qingfeng and Zhang Qi were one step behind them. Since Xiao Chen appeared, Du Qingfeng's attention had been fixed on Zhang Qi. As a super expert in the Dao Master realm, Du Qingfeng could naturally see Zhang Qi's cultivation. Just like himself, Zhang Qi was also a super expert in the Dao Master realm. He was a little shocked that there was a super expert in the Dao Master realm in Wucheng residence. Moreover, Zhang Qi didn't seem to be the person in charge of Wucheng residence. Otherwise, how could she follow Xiao Chen all the time? Moreover, Zhang Qi was very obedient to Xiao Chen's orders. He couldn't see through Tianqian residence. Vaguely, Du Qingfeng realized that Tianqian residence wasn't as simple as it seemed on the surface. Along the way, he chatted with Chu Wuming intermittently. Soon, they arrived at the main hall of the front yard. Just as Xiao Chen entered the main hall, the four of them saw Sky-Burning Ruler sitting on the main seat and Si Kongming standing respectfully beside him. Like Zhang Qi, Si Kongming was also a super expert in the Dao Master realm. In the entire Tianqian residence, there were only two super experts in the Dao Master realm, Zhang Qi and Si Kongming. Seeing Sky-Burning Ruler, Xiao Chen pretended to be surprised and said, "Uncle Tian, why are you here?" Obviously, it was impossible for Chu Wuming to meet Sky-Burning Ruler directly. After all, Chu Wuming was a prince. How could he take the initiative to greet someone without knowing who Sky-Burning Ruler was? Therefore, Xiao Chen and the others had a coincidental encounter. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Sky-Burning Ruler also said in a calm voice, "Oh, it's Chen. I didn't know Uncle was here. I have a friend here, so I won't disturb Uncle. Let's go to the backyard and chat," Xiao Chen said after hearing Sky-Burning Ruler's words. Taking the initiative to leave, Chu Wuming also bowed to Sky-Burning Ruler as Xiao Chen's voice fell. "Junior Chu Wuming greets Senior. I hope Senior can forgive me for disturbing you. There's no need to be so polite. Since you're Chinner's friend, you can come to Tianqian residence as your own home. There's no need to be so restrained. Go, I still have some things to discuss with Si Kongming." Facing Chu Wuming's bow, Sky-Burning Ruler didn't show the slightest surprise. Instead, he replied indifferently, as if he didn't care about Chu Wuming's identity as a prince. Of course, this was also the result that Xiao Chen and the others wanted. Chu Wuming didn't notice any clues. However, just as Xiao Chen thought, Du Qingfeng, who stood behind Chu Wuming, was already shocked. Although Du Qingfeng tried his best to conceal the fluctuation of emotions in his heart, the shock in his heart could still be clearly seen from his eyes. However, Chu Wuming didn't notice it, so he didn't notice it. According to Xiao Chen's plan, Sky-Burning Ruler had already quietly emitted a trace of his aura for Du Qingfeng to sense. Through this aura, Du Qingfeng naturally guessed that Sky-Burning Ruler was a Dao Emperor realm expert. Coupled with the fact that Si Kongming, who stood beside Sky-Burning Ruler, was an extraordinary expert at the Dao Sovereign realm, Du Qingfeng's heart was in turmoil at this moment. An unknown new power actually possessed a great figure at the Dao Emperor realm and two extraordinary experts at the Dao Exalt realm. Moreover, this might not even be the full strength of the Heavenly Stellar Residence. For a time, Du Qingfeng felt a wave of dizziness. At the same time, he was extremely excited in his heart. A Dao Emperor realm expert. I never expected that I would encounter a Dao Emperor realm expert here. Moreover, this person is Xiao Chen's uncle. In this way, if I'm able to rope in the Heavenly Stellar Pavilion, then wouldn't the third prince possess the ability to go against the first prince and second prince? Du Qingfeng was 100% loyal to Chu Wuming, so he thought of this at the first possible moment. Of course, his thoughts were actually what Xiao Chen needed. Du Qingfeng didn't bat an eyelid as he left the main hall with Chu Wuming. All along the way, Xiao Chen didn't pay any attention to Du Chengfeng. Since he'd achieved his objective, he brought Chu Wuming to the rear courtyard, and the two of them sat down in the courtyard. They seemed to be chatting happily, but such chatting didn't continue for long. Because Du Chengfeng was constantly giving Chu Wuming meaningful glances as if he was urging him to leave quickly. It was precisely because of Du Chengfeng's constant urging that Chu Wuming only stayed for less than an hour before Chu Wuming bid his farewells and left. He personally escorted Chu Wuming onto the carriage, and then Chu Wuming left in the carriage under the protection of a group of imperial guards. In the carriage, Chu Wuming looked at Du Chengfeng with a puzzled expression and asked, "Elder Du, why did you keep urging me to leave just now?" Chu Wuming didn't understand why Du Chengfeng kept urging him to leave. Originally, he wanted to improve his relationship with Xiao Chen. Hearing Chu Wuming's words, Du Chengfeng no longer concealed his astonishment and said, "Your Highness, to be honest, this heavenly stellar residence is not simple." "Oh, what do you mean? Is it because of the two warriors in the Tao transformation realm guarding the door?" "No, Your Highness, you don't know that the middle-aged man beside Xiao Chen just now is a super expert in the Tao Master realm." Zhang Qi was a super expert in the Tao Master realm. Hearing Du Chengfeng's words, Chu Wuming was stunned. He indeed didn't see through Zhang Qi's cultivation, but what surprised him more was that after a slight pause, Du Chengfeng took a deep breath and continued. Also, in the hall, the man standing beside Xiao Chen's uncle was also a super expert in the Tao Master realm. But these are not important. What really surprised me was that Xiao Chen's uncle was a Tao Emperor realm expert. Update 29, please bookmark, please recommend. You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.